Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. The first time Daniel Morgan heard footsteps on the ceiling, he thought it was only the settling of an old house surrendering to the cold. The night had been heavy with rain, and the chilled wind pushed through the loose window frames of his attic apartment. He had moved into the place 3 weeks earlier, believing its creaking wood and drafty halls were only small inconveniences. The rent was cheap, and the landlord had not asked many questions. That alone should have warned him. But Daniel had been desperate for a quiet corner to finish the book he was writing. Silence was what he needed more than anything. Yet silence was the one thing he would never find here. The first night had not been too strange. A few taps above him, a brief shiver in the floorboards, a sound like something shifting its weight in the rafters. He dismissed it all. Old houses groan, old houses breathe. He repeated that thought like a shield between himself and fear. But fear has a way of finding cracks. On the 7th night, the footsteps came again, slow and deliberate, crossing the ceiling from one side of his attic room to the other. The steps did not mimic human pace. They paused too long, as if listening. Then they dragged for an inch before lifting again. Daniel lay in his bed unmoving, pretending he had not heard them, but he had, and the footsteps knew he had. He tried to rationalize. Perhaps pigeons roosted under the shingles. Perhaps the roof beams contracted with temperature. But he knew the difference between the scatter of claws and the weight of a footfall. These were not light. They were steady. They belonged to something that knew exactly where he slept. He forced himself to rise from the bed, telling his trembling knees to hold steady. The rain outside had hushed, and the stillness in the room felt too heavy to breathe. He flicked on the lamp. Its yellow glow carved out only a faint comfort. Shadows stretched everywhere. He looked up at the cracked plaster ceiling. Nothing. No dust falling. No shifting boards. Only silence so deep it felt like breath held in a throat. Daniel stood there for minutes before he dared turn the light off again. If the footsteps were only imagination, he wanted sleep to prove him right. But as soon as the room darkened, he heard the faint scrape return, a long, slow drag of something across the floor above him. He sat up sharply. The drag became a step, then another. This time they moved to the center of the ceiling, directly above his bed. The sound stopped. Daniel's breath trembled in the quiet. He could not look away from the ceiling. He felt as if something behind the plaster waited every second for him to blink. He whispered to himself, "Old houses breathe, old houses breathe." But the house was not breathing. It was listening. He reached again for the lamp before his fingers touched the switch. The footsteps broke into a rapid shuffle, crossing the ceiling so violently that dust rained down over him in soft gray bursts. Daniel flinched as specks drifted down on his hands. Something above him was moving quickly now, pacing back and forth in irregular, frantic lines. His heartbeat climbed into his throat. Then the footsteps stopped again, this time right above him, so close he felt the faintest vibration run through his mattress. He could not move. His entire body felt locked inside cold stone. He waited for the steps to resume, but the silence deepened instead, a silence that felt crowded, as if something unseen leaned leaned down through the ceiling and hovered inches from him. Then came the soft tap. It was not on the ceiling this time. It was against the side of his bed. Daniel jerked backward, his breath collapsing into his lungs. Nothing was there, yet the air beside the mattress felt disturbed, as if someone had just withdrawn their hand. He turned on the lamp with a violent swipe. The room illuminated again, bare and still. His suitcase sat in the corner. His desk was cluttered with notes and empty coffee cups. His coat hung limp from a nail. Nothing was out of place. Nothing suggested he was in danger. And yet the cold in the room felt deeper than winter. Unable to rest, he stayed awake until dawn, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if waiting for it to open and reveal the stranger who lived above it. When the morning light finally broke across his windows, he packed a bag and went downstairs to the landlord. Mr. Jenkins answered the door with a tired face and a stale smell of tobacco. Daniel tried to explain about the footsteps. He spoke calmly at first, then with rising desperation. But the landlord narrowed his eyes and responded in a tone that felt practiced. "No one lives above you, Daniel. The attic is the topmost floor. The space above your ceiling is only an old crawl area. No one has been in there for decades." The words should have comforted him, but they did the opposite. If no one had been there for decades, then what moved each night with deliberate steps? Daniel returned upstairs reluctantly, feeling heavier with each stair. He wanted to leave. He wanted to run, but he also felt a strange pull toward the mystery. Something lived above that ceiling, something that had waited in darkness long before he arrived. And now it knew he was listening. That night he decided not to hide beneath blankets or pretend ignorance. He placed a chair at the center of the room and sat directly beneath the ceiling. He turned off the lights and waited. Minutes passed. An hour, then another. Silence held its breath. Finally, the first step came, and this time it whispered his name. Daniel did not sleep the following night. The whisper of his name shook him in a way he could not fully describe. It had not been loud. It had not even sounded like a human voice. Instead, it felt like breath pressed through the ceiling, like something that had waited for years to speak and had finally found a reason to break its silence. The moment it reached him, every instinct in his body tried to flee, but he was too frozen to move. Only when the whisper faded did he find the strength to breathe again. All night he remained in the chair, staring upward, unable to blink for too long, afraid the ceiling would shift again if he did. When dawn lit the edges of the attic room, Daniel finally rose. He walked to the cracked mirror near his desk. His reflection looked unfamiliar. His face had grown pale and thin. Dark rings circled his eyes. His hair stood unevenly where his hands had run through it, over and over during the night. The room smelled of dust and fear. He tried to tell himself he had imagined the whisper, but the sound still lingered behind his ears, as if floating through memory rather than air. He opened the attic hatch and climbed to the small crawl space above his ceiling. The wooden ladder shook beneath his weight. The smell hit him first. The air inside was old and dry, tinged with earth and something he could not identify. He raised his flashlight. The beam cut across narrow beams, roof shingles, hanging cobwebs, and decades of dust. Nothing moved. He whispered hello into the darkness, though he felt foolish doing so. His voice sounded small in the tight space. He crawled forward, pushing past wooden beams and ancient insulation. The ceiling boards beneath him creaked with every shift of his weight. There were no footprints in the dust. Not a single line disturbed the thick gray blanket. No rods or pipes that could create the illusion of footsteps. No entryway or hidden door. The silence in the crawl space felt unbroken and ancient. He stayed there longer than he needed to, studying every shadow, every inch of wood. When he finally lowered himself back into his attic room, he felt more unsettled than before. If nothing was up there, then the footsteps were not footsteps, but they sounded like them. They felt like them. Something above him had moved with intention. He spent much of that day walking through town, searching for distractions in bookstores, coffee shops, and narrow streets where conversations around him masked the echo of the whisper. Every time he paused, the thought returned. Something knows my name. Something waited for me. He wondered if this was connected to the history of the house. He had not asked much when he signed the lease. The landlord had seemed eager to let the attic room go. Too eager, now that he thought about it. When he passed by a local antique store, he hesitated. Inside, he found a woman arranging old books on a shelf. She looked up and smiled gently. "You look troubled," she said. That alone nearly made Daniel walk out. But instead, he asked her if she knew anything about the old house near Willow Street, the one with the attic room. Her expression changed. She did not answer immediately. Finally, she told him that years earlier, a young woman named Lillian had lived there. She had disappeared one winter without explanation. Some believed she had left town. Others whispered she had vanished inside the house itself. People avoided renting the attic after that. Strange noises, they said, strange dreams, a sense of someone else living just out of sight. Daniel felt the back of his neck grow cold. He thanked the woman and left quickly. His steps carried him through streets he did not remember choosing. The town felt smaller. Shadows between buildings seemed too thick. A feeling pressed on him, as though the whisper had followed him out of the house and now waited behind every corner. Night fell before Daniel returned to the attic. He considered leaving altogether, but fear had mixed with a strange pull, a need to understand. He stepped into his room and closed the door. The air felt colder than usual. He turned on the lamp beside his bed but kept the main light off. The glow reached only a few feet, leaving the edges of the room in heavy darkness. He sat back in the same chair as the night before. Midnight crept in slowly. The silence deepened. Daniel tried to steady his breathing, but it kept stuttering. Then the first soft tap echoed from the ceiling. A second tap followed. Then a step, and another. Each one echoed through the room like a pulse. This time the footsteps did not cross from one side to the other. They circled directly above him in small, deliberate movements. Daniel gripped the arms of the chair. The sound stopped. The silence that followed felt alive. Thick, expectant. A faint vibration carried through the ceiling. Dust loosened and drifted down in tiny flakes. Something pressed downward. The ceiling dipped slightly, only an inch, but enough for Daniel to see it. His breath broke. A shape formed above him, the faint outline of where weight rested against the boards. It was not a human outline. Too long, too too narrow. The shape held still as if studying him. Daniel whispered, "Who are you?" His voice cracked with fear. The shape shifted, then the whisper came again, sliding down through the ceiling like cold wind through cracks in stone. "Daniel," the sound wrapped around him. It felt like fingers brushing the back of his neck. He stumbled backward from the chair, nearly falling. The ceiling above him vibrated as the shape moved with increasing urgency, pacing in jagged lines. The footsteps grew sharper, more frantic, as if something trapped above the boards clawed for release. Daniel ran to the door, his hand shaken as he gripped the knob. Before he could turn it, a loud thud struck the ceiling so hard, dust burst in a cloud. He gasped and looked back. The ceiling bent again, deeper this time, as though something forced its weight downward in a desperate attempt to break through. Then the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt broken, like breath from a dying throat. Daniel pressed his back against the door. He waited for another step, another whisper. Instead, he felt a soft exhale drift across the room. Though no wind should have moved, it felt like a presence passing through him rather than around him. Finally, he flung open the door and rushed into the hallway. His footsteps echoed through the house. He did not stop until he reached the cold street outside. The night air hit his lungs like ice. He stood trembling under the weak glow of a street lamp, staring back at the dark attic window. Behind the glass, the shadows seemed to shift. Something watched him leave, and Daniel knew it would not stop calling his name. Daniel did not return to the attic for 2 days. He drifted through the town like a man in a dream, avoiding streets that led back to the house and avoiding glances that lingered too long on him. Sleep came in scattered minutes on park benches or in empty bus stations, but every time his eyes closed, he felt the ceiling above him waiting, pressing down, whispering his name in that cold, trembling way that slid beneath thought. He would wake with a jolt, heart racing, breath sharp, certain that when he looked up, he would see the warped wooden boards bending downward toward his face. But there was only open air and weak morning light. By the third night, exhaustion gnawed at him so deeply that even fear couldn't hold him upright. He knew he couldn't keep wandering the town like a ghost. Something in the attic had called his name, and something in him demanded to know why. Running made no difference. The whisper followed him even in silence. It lived behind his ribs now, a soft tremor of presence that refused to let him forget. He returned to the house near midnight. The old structure loomed against the sky, black and angular, its windows dull like blind eyes. The front door creaked open before he touched it, as if the house had been expecting him. The air inside felt thicker than before. The hallway smelled faintly of damp wood and something older, a scent that clung to memory rather than senses. Daniel swallowed hard and forced himself up the staircase. Each step groaned under him, complaining like old bones. When he reached the attic door, he hesitated. The brass knob felt too cold under his hand. He stood there for a long moment before pushing the door open. The room greeted him with silence. Dust hung unmoving in the air. The lamp beside the bed flickered as though startled by his return. Everything looked the same, but something felt different. The The space felt aware. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it, breathing slowly. He scanned the ceiling. The plaster looked unchanged. No cracks, no dips, no marks of weight pressed into it. But the memory of the shape above him pulsed through his mind. Too long, too narrow, too still. He stepped into the center of the room, directly beneath the place where the footsteps had circled. He felt foolish talking to the ceiling, yet he forced the words out. "What do you want?" The silence stretched, heavy. His voice felt swallowed by the air. He took another breath and whispered again, louder this time. "What do you want from me?" The lamp flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. The room answered not with sound, but with cold. A wave of icy air swept across him, chilling him to the bone. He shuddered, but did not step back. He sensed movement, though nothing stirred. Shadows along the walls deepened, as if thickening. A faint thump came from the ceiling. Not a step, a heartbeat. Daniel looked up. The plaster trembled softly, like something breathing on the other side. Slowly, deliberately, a shape pressed downward. This time the outline was clearer, forming as though the ceiling were a thin skin, and something beneath it pushed upward from depths unseen. The shape elongated, stretching across the beams. Not human shoulders, not human limbs. Something more fluid, more ancient. It held still, as though listening for his breath. His throat tightened. His voice escaped in a whisper. "Who are you?" The ceiling pulsed. A soft crack spread across the plaster, a thin white line curving like a smile. Dust sifted down in lazy spirals. The cold deepened until his fingers numbed. Then came a whisper, quieter than before, almost tender. "Daniel." The whisper felt closer, lower, as if no longer above the ceiling. But beneath his skin, his knees threatened to give out. He stepped backward until his heel hit the leg of the chair. He did not sit. The shape above him shifted. A slow, dragging sound throbbed through the beams. Something moved across the ceiling with unnatural grace, gliding rather than stepping. It circled him again, tracing the same pattern as before. The house creaked in response, settling under a weight that did not belong to the living. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, gathering what little strength he had left. When he opened them again, the shape had stopped above the corner of the room. Daniel followed its position with a trembling gaze. The air in the room felt thin. He forced himself to speak. "What happened here?" The whisper that answered was not a word, but a sigh, long and aching. The ceiling above the corner darkened slightly, as if stained from within. A faint outline formed, the suggestion of a doorframe, a crawl space entrance. Yet Daniel had never seen any opening there. His breath hitched. The air shimmered faintly as though memories pulsed through it. He saw a flicker of movement, a shadow crossing the corner in a way that suggested someone once stood there, someone waiting. Daniel lifted his flashlight. Its beam quivered across the ceiling. The shape dissolved into the plaster again, leaving only cracks like veins branching outward. He stepped toward the corner. The cold thickened around him, wrapping like a shroud. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to leave the room and never return. but something deeper rooted him in place. Something about the name Lillian echoed in him now. The antique shop woman's voice returned unbidden. She disappeared one winter. Daniel pressed his hand against the wall. The surface felt wrong, too cold, too soft, like damp paper stretched over bone. A sudden knock jolted him. It came from inside the wall. Once, twice, then silence. Daniel stumbled backward, heart racing. The knock had not sounded random. It had sounded like someone trapped inside, begging for release. He forced himself to speak again, though his voice shook. "Are you Lillian?" The ceiling answered, not with a whisper, but with a sudden violent stomp that sent a burst of dust into the air. Daniel choked on the particles as they rained around him. The stomp came again, harder this time, rattling the lamp and shaking the floor beneath him. It was not anger, it was desperation. He backed toward the door. His hand found the knob, but something inside him resisted leaving. If there was someone trapped here, someone calling to him, then turning away meant condemning them. The stomping stopped abruptly. The room fell into stillness so complete it felt suffocating. Daniel hesitated. The cold air brushed his cheek like the touch of a hand. Then, gently, the whisper returned. "Help me." Daniel froze. The words were clearer now, shaped like human speech, trembling with grief. They slid into him like a plea that had waited decades to be heard. "Help me." His breath shook. He stepped away from the door. The ceiling above him pulsed once more, as though something on the other side reached toward him with outstretched hands. He did not know what waited inside the walls, or why it had called his name, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Something in this house wanted to be found. And now it had chosen him. Daniel stood in the center of the attic, unable to move. The whisper lingered in the air like a fading breath, stretching the silence into something almost fragile. "Help me," the words pulsed inside him, echoing through the hollow of his ribs, clinging like a memory he never lived but somehow recognized. The room felt smaller now, shrinking inward, as though the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. Even the flame of the lamp seemed frozen, a thin, unmoving line of light trapped in stillness. He swallowed hard. Every instinct insisted he run, but the plea anchored him. Something in this house had been waiting for him far longer than he had lived here. Something wanted to be found. He could no longer pretend the footsteps belonged to imagination or dreams. This presence, whatever it was, had learned to speak, not through the ceiling or walls, but through the cold breath of the house itself. Daniel forced his legs to move. He walked toward the corner where the phantom doorway had flickered into existence. The air here was colder, like the residue of winter trapped in a single pocket of space. He reached out slowly and pressed his fingers against the plaster. It felt softer than it should, as though the wall were bruised beneath his touch. A faint tremor passed under his palm, subtle but unmistakable. "Show me where you are," he whispered. A faint crackling sound rippled through the ceiling. Dust loosened in gentle cascades, drifting downward as though stirred by invisible hands. A soft thump followed, not violent this time, but precise. It sounded like a single fingertip tapping from the other side, then another and another. The taps aligned in a slow rhythm, tracing a shape across the ceiling. Daniel stepped back to see it better. His breath caught. The taps formed the outline of a rectangle, a door, not the crawl space hatch he had entered before. This one was larger, older, hidden directly above the corner where the dark shape had paused. The taps continued, outlining corners and edges until the shape of the door was unmistakable. He felt heat rush to his face, a mix of fear and adrenaline. The house was showing him something. Daniel dragged his chair beneath the newly revealed outline. He climbed onto it, reaching upward. The ceiling was just within touch. His fingers traced the faint indentation where the outline had been marked by the taps. The wood here felt different, smoother, as though handled repeatedly long ago. He pressed firmly. Something clicked. A thin line split open across the ceiling, releasing a burst of stale air that smelled of dust, age, and something faintly metallic. Daniel coughed, but did not climb down. He pushed harder, and the panel shifted. With one final shove, the hidden door swung inward, revealing a dark void above him. The cold intensified. He steadied his breath, grabbed his flashlight, and lifted himself through the opening. His shoulders scraped against the narrow frame. The air inside felt thick and unmoving, untouched by time. He switched on the flashlight. The beam illuminated a small, cramped chamber lined with old wooden beams and rotted insulation. Cobwebs draped from every surface like torn cloth. Beneath them lay objects scattered across the floor. He crawled forward, trembling. The first thing his light touched was a shoe, a small, weathered shoe covered in dust. Next to it lay a torn journal binding, its pages missing. Farther in, a thin blanket lay curled in the corner, as though someone once slept here or hid here. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. Lillian, the name formed unbidden. This space felt lived in, but not recently. Whoever had stayed here had done so long before Daniel arrived. He shivered as his hand brushed against a metal ring attached to a wooden beam, a restraint. He jerked his hand away. "What happened here?" he whispered. The air grew colder. Something shifted behind him. He froze. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, like fingertips brushing wood. Slowly, he turned the flashlight. The beam fell on a narrow crease in the far wall, barely noticeable, but the plaster there bulged inward, as though something pressed from the other side. "Help me!" The whisper came again, this time behind him. Too close. He spun, but there was no one. Only the empty chamber, the dust, the forgotten relics of someone who once lived in fear. The whisper had not come from the attic below. It had come from here. This space, this darkness. Daniel backed toward the hidden door, his breath uneven. The bulging plaster cracked. He stumbled away, falling against the wooden floor. A long, thin fissure spread across the wall. The flashlight flickered as the temperature dropped further. His breath spilled in pale clouds. He watched, horrified, as the fissure widened. Something moved behind it, slow, deliberate. Pressing outward, the wall groaned. Daniel scrambled to the door frame. He started to climb down, desperate to escape, but the whisper stopped him. "Don't leave me." The voice was clearer now. Human, female, broken. He froze halfway through the opening. The chamber vibrated softly. He looked back. The fissure had grown to the size of a handprint. A pale outline pressed through the plaster, the shape of fingers stretching toward him. Daniel's heart pounded. He stared at the reaching shape. Was it Lillian or something else masquerading as her? The plea shook him. He wanted to help, but some deep instinct warned him that whatever lay behind that wall did not belong in this world anymore. The plaster cracked louder, splitting in jagged lines. Daniel flung himself down through the opening, landing hard on the attic floor. He stumbled backward as dust rained down from above, and the hidden door slammed shut of its own accord, sealing the chamber in darkness once more. Silence followed, thick, smothering. Then the footsteps returned, slow at first, then faster, frenzied, pacing above him in violent circles. Daniel crawled backward until his back hit the far wall. He covered his ears, but it was useless. The house itself seemed to shake. The ceiling bowed downward, a distorted shadow forming where something moved with desperate rage. "Help me!" The whispered plea broke into a sob. Daniel stared upward, trembling uncontrollably. He did not know whether he had escaped something reaching for him or abandoned something that desperately needed him. Both possibilities terrified him, and as the ceiling pulsed again, he knew one thing: the house would not release him, not until he opened that wall. Daniel sat on the attic floor long after the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt unnatural, as if it had been placed over the house like a blanket to smother any trace of what had just occurred. The ceiling no longer pulsed, the boards no longer bent, but Daniel felt the presence all around him, lingering in the chilled air and heavy shadows. It was as if the house had exhaled and now waited for him to do the same. He forced himself to breathe. Each breath felt shallow, thin, as though the air had been squeezed by unseen hands. He pressed his palms against the floor, grounding himself in the rough wood grain. The trembling in his legs refused to stop. He had seen something behind the wall, not clearly, not fully, but enough to know that something trapped in the chamber above was reaching toward him. Whether it was a person, a remnant of one, or something far older, he could not be certain. The only truth he understood was that it wanted him, needed him, called him by name. He finally rose on unsteady feet. The attic seemed darker now. Corners that once looked empty now appeared filled with watching shapes. His breaths shuddered as he moved toward his desk. Papers lay scattered across its surface, pages of his unfinished book. He touched one, then pulled his hand away. The paper was cold, not from the air, but from something else, a residue of presence. The house had touched everything while he was gone. Daniel rubbed his face. He needed answers, not more whispers, not more footsteps. Answers, something rooted in fact, not fear. He grabbed his coat and forced himself down the stairs. The house creaked as though disappointed in him for leaving again. When he stepped outside, the night air hit him with its clean, open cold. No whispers, no footsteps, just the distant hum of the quiet town. He walked quickly toward the antique shop where the woman had told him the story of Lillian. The streets were empty, dimly lit by scattered street lamps that flickered in the quiet wind. When he reached the shop, the windows were dark. but he knocked anyway. He waited, knocked again. At last, the door creaked open a few inches, and the woman's tired face appeared. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "You came back," she said softly. "You shouldn't have." "Please," Daniel said. "I need to know more. About the house, about Lillian, about what happened to her." The woman hesitated, but then gestured him inside. The shop felt different at night. Shadows stretched across shelves stacked with old books and forgotten artifacts. The air smelled of dust and worn leather. She led him to a small table at the back of the shop and lit a single candle. Its flame shook as though sensing what Daniel carried with him from the attic. "Tell me everything," she said. Daniel did. He told her about the footsteps, the whispers, the shape pressing through the ceiling, the hidden chamber, the reaching hand, the plea for help. He spoke in pieces, breath shaking, words trembling. The woman listened without interrupting. When he finally finished, she looked down at her hands as if weighing what she would say next. "Lillian didn't simply disappear," she whispered. "She was taken." "Taken," Daniel repeated. "By who?" The woman shook her head slowly. "Not who. What?" "The house has a history older than Lillian, older than its foundations. Something lingers there, drawn to certain kinds of people, sensitive people, people who can hear what others cannot." Daniel swallowed. "Why me?" "Because you heard it. That is all it needs." Her words cut through him. The candle flickered violently, as though a gust of unseen wind had blown through the shop. Daniel leaned closer. "What does it want?" The woman's eyes lifted to his. "To be found, to be freed, or to be replaced. It is not always clear which." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Replaced." The words settled over him like cold ash. He forced himself to continue. Was Lillian taken into that chamber? Was she trapped behind the wall? The woman hesitated again, then opened an old wooden drawer. She withdrew a tiny silver locket and placed it on the table. The metal was tarnished, dull with age. Daniel opened it. Inside was a small black and white photograph of a young woman with soft eyes and a faint smile. "Lillian," the woman confirmed. She would sit in that attic writing in her journal for hours. She said she could hear someone walking above her, someone speaking her name. We told her it was the old pipes, the house settling, but she insisted someone lived between the walls, someone trapped. Daniel stared at the photograph. The face staring back at him was peaceful, unaware of what fate awaited her. The woman continued. "One night she came here, shaking, saying she heard a voice asking for help. The next morning, she was gone, no trace, just her journal pages scattered in the attic." Daniel felt a chill creeping up his spine. He remembered the torn binding in the hidden chamber, the dusty blanket, the restraint. "She didn't leave town," Daniel whispered. "She was taken by the house." The woman nodded. "And now it calls you." Daniel pressed his hand against his mouth. The candle flickered again, but this time the flame bent sharply to the side, as though pulled by an unseen force. The woman stood abruptly. "You need to leave that house," she said. "Tonight, before it takes you to." Daniel wanted to. Every part of him screamed to run, but something deeper, something tethered to the whisper he had heard for nights, refused. "I can't leave," he said. "Not while something is trapped there. If it is Lillian, if she needs help, I cannot abandon her." The woman's expression tightened with fear. "Be careful what you believe is asking for help," she said. "Some things mimic what they consume." Before Daniel could respond, a loud crack echoed through the shop. The candle blew out. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, neither moved. Then Daniel felt it, a cold brush of air passing behind him. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Daniel." He froze. The woman gasped, backing away from him. "It followed you," she whispered. "You brought it here." Daniel stumbled toward the door. He flung it open and rushed into the street. The air outside felt thick, suffocating. A shadow stretched across the road, long and crooked, though nothing stood to cast it. His breath quickened. He ran back toward the house, the whisper trailing behind him like a shadow tied to his spine. As he reached the front door, the house seemed to inhale. The boards creaked, the windows rattled, the whispers multiplied. No longer a single voice, but a chorus, overlapping in desperate tones. "Help me! Help me! Don't leave me!" Daniel gripped the doorknob, breath shaking. He knew the woman was right. Whatever called to him might not be Lillian. It might not be human, but he also knew he had been chosen, pulled into something far older than the house itself. He stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. Daniel stepped into the house, and before he could turn around, the front door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. The echo rolled through the hall like thunder, vibrating through the wooden floorboards beneath his feet. The air shifted instantly. A heavy cold settled on him, deeper and sharper than anything he had felt outside. It wrapped around his chest and climbed slowly up his spine. He exhaled shakily. The whispers did not fade with distance. They thickened, filling every shadowed corner of the house. He moved forward. The stairs leading to the attic loomed above him, steep and narrow, warped slightly from age. Something in the darkness at the top waited, watching. The house breathed with him, each inhale a soft groan of its structure, each exhale a whisper sliding across walls. "Daniel, Daniel." The voice was layered now, as if more than one presence repeated his name with trembling desperation. Some voices sounded faint, distant. Others curled just behind his ear. He kept climbing. His hand clung to the railing, splinters pricking his skin. Halfway up, the lights flickered, then died completely. He climbed the rest of the way, guided only by the thin glow of his flashlight. The attic door stood slightly open, though he distinctly remembered closing it that morning. A faint draft whispered through the gap, carrying the thick scent of dust and something metallic. Blood, not fresh, old, something ancient. Daniel swallowed. He pushed the door open slowly, as if revealing the room too quickly might provoke whatever waited inside. The attic greeted him with suffocating darkness. The beam of his flashlight sliced through the gloom, catching dust swirling in slow spirals. Nothing moved, but something had changed. The air felt charged, electric, as though the room held memory, grief, and fury in equal measure. Shadows clung to the ceiling in unnatural shapes, stretching longer than the light should allow. Daniel stepped in. The door closed behind him with a soft click that made his breath hitch. The whispers resumed immediately, coiling around him like smoke. "Help me, help me." He turned the flashlight upward. The ceiling bore new cracks, thin but spreading like veins across plaster. Dust sifted down in small, lazy trails. The shape he had seen earlier no longer pressed through the boards, but he felt it there, hovering just behind the surface, waiting for him to respond. "What do you want from me?" Daniel whispered. The house answered with silence first. Then a low groan rolled through the ceiling. The plaster bowed outward slightly, then snapped back. Daniel stepped backward. The flashlight trembled in his hand. A sudden, sharp knock came from the corner of the ceiling, followed by another, forming a pattern, a message. He listened. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. He shook his head. He did not understand. The knocks repeated, louder now, then stopped abruptly. The silence that followed pressed into him like weight. Daniel approached the corner where the hidden chamber lay above. The ceiling seemed thinner here, almost translucent under the flashlight beam. Something darker pooled behind it. He climbed onto the chair he had left earlier. His breath fogged the air. He pressed a hand against the plaster. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch, as though a heartbeat thrummed from the other side. "Are you Lillian?" he whispered. "Are you trying to show me something?" The ceiling did not crack this time. Instead, it hummed, a low vibration, and then footsteps returned, but not overhead. Behind him, Daniel spun around. The attic was empty, but he heard them clearly walking toward him, slow, barefoot, soft thuds against the old floorboards. He raised the flashlight. The beam swept across the room. Nothing, yet the footsteps grew closer, stopping only a few feet behind him. He felt a breath brush the back of his neck. "Daniel!" He turned violently, stumbling off the chair. He backed into the wall as the flashlight flickered wildly. The air distorted in front of him, as though something invisible attempted to shape itself against the light. A faint outline shimmered. A shoulder, a head, long hair drifting like strands of smoke. "Lillian!" He froze. The figure did not fully form, remaining trapped between presence and shadow, but he could feel her anguish, her desperation, radiating through the attic like an open wound. Her voice wavered. "Help me." Daniel took a step forward. His fear dissolved beneath a surge of empathy. He felt the weight of her suffering, her years trapped in confined darkness. "What do I do?" he whispered. "How do I help you?" The figure lifted a trembling arm, pointing toward the ceiling, the hidden chamber. Daniel nodded. He climbed the chair again. He reached up and pushed at the panel. It resisted this time, as though something behind it pulled back. He pushed harder. The ceiling groaned. The panel slowly shifted. A sudden scream ripped through the attic. Not Lillian's, something deeper, older, terrifying. Daniel stumbled back. The figure dissolved immediately, evaporating into shadow. The room darkened. The air thickened, and something slammed against the hidden chamber wall above with such force that plaster cracked and rained down in chunks. Daniel shielded his face. A second slam followed. Then a third, each more violent than the last. Something behind that wall fought to escape. Daniel ran toward the door, but when he twisted the knob, it would not turn. The house held it shut. He slammed his shoulder into it, but the door would not budge. Behind him, the ceiling split open further. A long, jagged tear exposed rotted wood and complete darkness. Something moved in that darkness. He turned slowly. A hand stretched through the tear, pale and long, grasping the empty air like it searched blindly for him. Another hand followed. Too thin, too many joints, too unfamiliar to belong to anything human. Daniel screamed and backed into the door. The whispers rose to a scream themselves. "Help me, help me." "Don't let it out." "Not Lillian." Something else screamed over her voice. Something filled with hunger. Daniel grabbed the lamp, hurling it at the tear. Flame burst across the ceiling, briefly illuminating the twisted form behind the wall, a shape that had once been human but stretched unnaturally, hollow eyes sunken deep into darkness, a mouth opened unnaturally wide, screaming without sound. Daniel yanked the door again. This time it opened. He bolted downstairs, stumbling as whispers chased him, overlapping in agony and fury. He reached the front door, flung it open, and collapsed onto the porch. The night air felt alive with watchful silence. Behind him, the house settled, as though whatever lived inside had returned to its prison for now. Daniel stared at the dark windows of the attic. He knew he had to go back, but next time, he would not go alone. Daniel sat on the porch until the trembling in his hands finally slowed, though the cold night air bit into his skin like sharp teeth. The wind brushed past him in uneven gusts, carrying faint whispers that he could no longer distinguish from the echoes in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the pale hands pushing through the ceiling, the impossible joints bending as they reached for him, the hollow face screaming without sound. Something in that wall had not been calling for help. Something else had. Something far older and much more patient. But the image that haunted him even more was the brief figure of Lillian, the faint, shimmering form that appeared before everything went wrong. Her outline, fragile but human, standing just behind him, begging him to help. She had pointed to the hidden chamber, not to free whatever monster had taken her place, but to stop it, or to finish what she could not. Daniel pushed himself up from the porch step. He could not stay outside. The house loomed behind him like a crouched animal, dark and waiting. The attic window stared down with the hollow emptiness of an open wound. He knew he should walk away, leave the house behind forever, but something deeper inside him refused. Lillian had asked for help. He could not abandon her the way everyone else had, but he would not go back alone. He hurried down the street toward the antique shop. The lights inside were still out, and the windows dark, but he hammered on the door until the woman appeared again, her face pale with fear. "You should not be here," she whispered urgently. "It followed you last time. It will do so again. Please," Daniel said, breathing hard. "I saw her. Lillian. She appeared in the attic. She's trapped. Whatever is behind that wall took her. I need to know how to stop it." The woman hesitated, then opened the door fully. Daniel stepped inside, and she shut the door quickly behind him, as though sealing out an invisible presence. The candle on the table flickered again, even though no window was open. "Tell me exactly what you saw," she said. Daniel recounted everything. the shimmering figure forming in the air, the hidden chamber resisting him, the scream that tore through the attic, the monstrous shape forcing its way through the wall, the whispers begging him not to let it out. The woman listened carefully. When he finished, she closed her eyes and let out a long, shaking breath. "It is worse than I feared," she whispered. "The thing that took Lillian. It is not a spirit. It is not human. It is something that sinks into the walls of old places, a hunger that grows over time. It mimics voices. It wears memories like masks. It becomes whatever you trust most." Daniel felt his throat tighten. Then the Lillian I saw might not be her, the woman finished softly. Or it might be a piece of her, the house swallowed. These things never take a person cleanly. They take fragments, memories, traces, and they leave something else behind. Daniel lowered his gaze. He felt suddenly sick. But the figure had pointed toward the chamber. Was that real? If she was truly gone, then why did the apparition try to help him? The woman moved toward a dusty shelf and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside lay a set of rusted tools, a worn journal, and a small iron pendant shaped like a circle divided by a straight line. "This house," she said, "was built over the remains of an older structure, a hunting lodge from the late 1700s. The men who lived there wrote about hearing voices in the walls, strange footsteps at night, and people disappearing. This pendant was buried beneath the foundation. Some believed it was a ward, a barrier meant to trap the thing inside the walls." Daniel took the pendant. It felt unnaturally cold. "What do I do with it?" he asked. She hesitated again. "If the creature has awakened fully, nothing may stop it. But if Lillian is still inside that wall, even a fragment of her spirit may weaken its hold. This pendant might draw her forward, allow her to speak clearly. But understand this, if you go back, you will not return unless you face whatever is behind that wall." Daniel nodded slowly. He felt a strange calm settle inside him. Fear remained, but beneath it something steadier now pulsed. Determination, a need to finish this nightmare in a way Lillian never got the chance to. "I'll go now," he said. The woman looked at him with grief in her eyes but did not argue. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "If she calls again, listen. But not everything that uses her voice is her." Daniel left the shop and hurried back toward the house. The pendant clutched in his hand felt heavier with every step. The night seemed to grow thicker around him. The whispering wind followed at his heels. When he reached the house, the door stood open, not wide, but enough to suggest invitation or warning. Daniel stepped inside. The air shifted. The house inhaled again, its boards creaking like ancient ribs drawing breath. Shadows tightened around the edges of the hallway. The staircase seemed steeper than before, stretched into the darkness like a throat leading upward. Daniel started climbing. Halfway up, the pendant vibrated in his fist, a faint warm pulse. Subtle but unmistakable, the whispers above him shifted tone, growing sharper. "Panicked, help me." Please help me. Daniel climbed faster. The attic door was shut now. He reached for the knob. It was warm, too warm, like something alive pulsed behind it. He pushed the door open. The attic was darker than he had ever seen it. The light from the hallway barely reached inside. Daniel raised his flashlight. The beam caught only fragments of the room. The chair overturned, the desk scattered, the walls tremoring, and then the whisper returned, but different. Daniel. The voice was clear, softer, human. He turned. A figure stood at the far end of the room, the faint shape of a woman, shoulders narrow, hair falling like drifting smoke. He lifted the pendant, and the shape brightened slightly. Lillian. She lifted an arm slowly, painfully, and pointed toward the hidden chamber above. Daniel felt the air thicken as the ceiling groaned. The panel shook violently, as though something inside hammered against it. "Don't free it," she whispered. "Seal it." "How?" Daniel breathed. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her form flickered violently. Then a dark shape rose behind her, towering and twisting, pulling her backward into its depth. Her hands stretched toward Daniel. Her scream echoed through the attic. Daniel stumbled forward, lifting the pendant as the shape swallowed her form entirely. A deep growl filled the room, shaking the floor beneath him. The ceiling cracked wide above the chamber. A thick, clawed hand burst through the plaster. Daniel screamed and ran toward the broken panel, pendant in hand. He did not know what he was about to do, only that he had to do it now before the house itself broke open. Daniel lunged toward the ceiling panel, with the pendant clenched so tightly in his fist that its cold edges dug sharply into his skin. The attic trembled around him as though the house itself were reacting to his decision, either in fury or anticipation. He could not tell. Each step he took forward made the air grow heavier, thicker, like wading through unseen currents that dragged at his clothes and limbs. Behind him, the dark figure that had swallowed Lillian's shape was still sinking back into the shadows, but its presence remained like a stain in the air, an imprint of something ancient refusing to release its claim on the room. The ceiling above him heaved, the boards bulged downward as the monstrous hand clawed through the plaster again. Dust exploded in a cloud around it, drifting like ash. The shape twisted unnaturally, not built on human structure. Its fingers too long, its joints bending in wrong directions. The house groaned under its weight. Daniel hoisted himself onto the chair, heart hammering against his ribs. The pendant pulsed with faint warmth, as if sensing the creature's presence. The hidden chamber shuddered like something alive, its edges cracking wider under the force of whatever tried to escape. The scream returned, a sound that did not belong in any world of the living. It was all at once a roar, a sob, a wail of hunger. It felt both far away and pressed directly into Daniel's ear. His knees almost buckled. The chair beneath him wobbled. "Don't free it. Seal it." Lillian's voice returned, but faint, strangled, as if fighting to reach him through layers of darkness. He looked toward where her shimmering figure had stood moments before. Nothing remained but a thin trail of pale dust, or perhaps memory, drifting toward the floorboards. Daniel took a breath and pressed the pendant against the cracked ceiling panel. A shockwave pulsed outward. For a moment, the attic flashed with white light. The cracks across the ceiling glowed. The monstrous hand recoiled violently as if burned, slamming back into the chamber with enough force to shake the entire room. Daniel nearly fell from the chair, catching himself just in time. The pendant heated in his grip. Something hissed inside the chamber. Not the high, agonized scream from before, but a low, furious growl. Daniel pushed harder. The boards beneath the pendant began to shift, sliding together like the pieces of a mechanism that had not moved in centuries. Seal it now. Lillian's voice broke through again, clearer this time. Daniel felt a surge of determination. He lifted himself higher, pressing his entire forearm against the ceiling panel as it began to move. A grinding, ancient sound filled the attic, like stone dragging against stone. The hidden door resisted. It fought him, but he pushed with everything left inside him. His legs trembled. The chair beneath him groaned. The growl from the chamber transformed into a shriek. Something slammed into the opposite side of the panel. The ceiling bowed dangerously. Old wood cracked. The pendant blazed with heat. The ceiling panel snapped closed. For a moment, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Silence stretched through the attic like a held breath. Daniel stared upward, frozen in place, afraid the panel would burst open again. Instead, the pendant cooled instantly in his hand, and the attic exhaled. Dust settled softly. The trembling in the floorboards eased. The oppressive weight in the air lifted just slightly, like a blanket pulled off for the first time in days. Daniel stepped down from the chair, his legs shaking so badly that he fell to his knees. He stayed there for several seconds, gripping the pendant, trying to steady his breath. Then, a soft sob echoed through the attic. Daniel jolted upright. Not the creature's cry, but hers, Lillian's. He turned slowly. A faint shimmer appeared near the far wall, growing brighter, forming the delicate outline of a woman. Shoulders narrow, hair drifting like soft smoke. Her face flickered between sorrow and relief. "You sealed it," she whispered. "Thank you." Daniel stepped closer. "Are you safe now? Are you free?" The figure trembled. "Not free, but safer. Its hold has weakened, but you must be careful. It is not dead. It waits, and it knows you now." Daniel swallowed. His hands tightened around the pendant. "What do I do next?" The figure raised her arm, pointing toward the hidden chamber again. "Its root lies deeper," she whispered. "Beneath the floor, beneath the house. You must find its source. If you do not, it will rise again. And next time, it will not wait." Daniel stared at the floorboards beneath his feet. His stomach knotted with dread. "You want me to go down there?" Lillian nodded. Her form dimmed slightly. "There is a trapdoor, hidden, old. The men who built the lodge sealed something beneath it, something they feared. The creature feeds from that place, weakens its victims, pulls them into the walls. Like you," Daniel whispered. She bowed her head. Before he could say anything else, her form flickered violently. The air shivered, as though a cold wind sliced through it. Lillian jerked backward, her figure bending in unnatural angles. A shadow behind her surged suddenly, wrapping around her form. "No!" Daniel reached out instinctively, her face twisted in silent terror as she was yanked backward into the darkness. Her arm stretched toward him until her hand dissolved into dust. The attic plummeted into silence. Daniel stumbled forward, but nothing remained of her. No shimmer, no trace. Only the pendant's faint pulse in his hand reminded him she had been there at all. He knelt and pressed his palm to the floorboards. The wood felt warmer here, older, as if something beneath had stirred. He tapped along the edges until a hollow echo returned from one spot, a faint difference in sound. The trapdoor. Daniel pried at the boards with trembling fingers. They resisted at first, stuck from decades of disuse, but slowly he managed to lift a corner. Dust poured from the opening. A scent wafted upward cold earth, rot, and something metallic, something breathing. Daniel held the pendant tightly, took a shaking breath, and began lifting the trapdoor wider. Whatever waited beneath the house had been sleeping for centuries, and now, finally, it had someone to wake it. Daniel knelt over the widening trapdoor, staring into the darkness below as if the house had opened a mouth. The air rising from it carried a cold that felt older than the wood beneath his knees, a cold that did not belong to weather, but to something buried, something watching from beneath the floorboards. His breath turned to mist. The pendant pulsed faintly in his hand, as though warning him or urging him forward. He could not tell which. For a long moment he hesitated. The attic behind him lay quiet now, stripped of the pounding footsteps and screams that had shaken it minutes before. But the stillness was wrong, forced, as if the house held its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. He leaned forward, shining his flashlight down into the opening. Wooden steps descended into the dark, steep and narrow, covered in a century's worth of dust. The light reached only far enough to show where the staircase turned sharply out of sight. No movement, no sound, just the hum of something alive deeper in the earth, something patient. Daniel tightened his grip on the pendant. Lillian had asked him to find the source, if she had any hope left, any part of her still clinging to the edges of this place. He could not leave her imprisoned in the dark, prey to something that consumed memories and left only fragments behind. He had come too far to turn back. He lowered himself through the trapdoor. The steps creaked under his weight, groaning softly as though resentful to be touched after so many years. Each footstep echoed through the narrow passageway, swallowed by the darkness before he reached the next. The walls felt too close, pressing inward, as if carved through a body rather than earth. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a long, low corridor. The floor was bare dirt, uneven, with deep grooves cut through it, as if something had been dragged along the ground repeatedly. The walls were rough stone lined with old wooden beams. Strange symbols had been carved into the beam's circles, slashes, spirals, though most were worn, their meanings lost in time. The air tasted metallic. Daniel scanned the room, his breath caught. On the far wall hung a row of restraints, iron chains attached to thick wooden posts. Some hung loose, others had been twisted apart, as though something impossibly strong had ripped through them. The floor beneath the restraints was darker than the rest of the dirt, as though soaked by something long ago. This was no storage storage cellar. This was a holding pit. The creature had been kept here once. Daniel stepped closer. His flashlight illuminated scratches on the stone wall deep, desperate gouges carved by fingernails or claws. Some formed words, though most were broken, frantic, incomplete. Only one phrase stood out clearly. "It's still hungry." Daniel stepped back involuntarily. The pendant pulsed in his hand again, stronger this time, guiding him toward a second passageway that branched off to the right. He followed it cautiously, each step slowing as the air grew colder still. The corridor twisted like the inside of a maze. His heartbeat echoed through his ears. Then he heard it, breathing, not his, a slow, ragged inhale, a long, shaking exhale coming from the darkness ahead. Daniel froze. His voice stuck in his throat. The breathing grew louder, closer. His flashlight trembled in his hand. He raised it slowly and saw her. Lillian stood at the end of the corridor, her back to him, her hair hanging in limp strands. Daniel felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly dropped him to his knees. "Lillian," he whispered. She did not turn. "Lillian," he repeated louder. He took a step toward her. Her head turned slightly, not enough to see her face, just the slightest tilt, as though listening. Daniel's breath hitched. "Please," he said softly. "Tell me what to do." She twitched. Her shoulders jerked upward sharply, unnaturally, and her head twisted a little more. Too far, the motion too sharp to be human. Daniel froze mid-step. Her voice drifted through the corridor. Soft, cracked. "Daniel." A chill cut straight through him. That was not her voice. Not truly. Something mimicked her tone, her cadence, but beneath it was a hollow echo, as if another voice spoke at the same time. A deeper, older voice. Lillian's form flickered, then snapped into stillness. Daniel's grip on the pendant tightened until his knuckles whitened. The pendant pulsed violently now, warning him. He stepped backward. The figure turned, and Daniel's heart nearly stopped. It was Lillian's face, but stretched, drained of color. Her eyes blackened hollow pits. Her mouth hung open, wider than humanly possible. Her joints bent wrong, her body elongated in unnatural ways, yet her expression was frozen in a silent scream. She stepped toward him. Daniel stumbled backward, nearly falling. The creature moved with jerking motions, its limbs cracking with each step, its mouth widening further. "Help me," it whispered. The voice came from deep inside its throat, layered with dozens of others, voices of those who had been taken before. The thing lunged. Daniel spun and ran, sprinting back down the corridor. The creature's footsteps slammed against the dirt behind him. The passage trembled. His flashlight flickered wildly. He reached the main cellar chamber, his breath breaking. The stairs were too far. He would never reach them in time. The pendant seared against his palm. A force surged outward, a burst of pale light that shot across the chamber like a shockwave. Daniel shielded his eyes. The creature shrieked, shrill and piercing. When Daniel looked up, the corridor behind him had collapsed inward, sealed by falling earth and stone. The creature scratched violently at the other side, howling in rage and hunger. Daniel staggered to his feet, gasping. The pendant dimmed again, but the danger was not gone. Behind him, deeper in the darkness, something larger stirred. A low rumble shook the ground. Daniel turned slowly. lifting the flashlight toward the far end of the chamber. There, carved into the stone floor, was a massive circular sigil, the same symbol from the pendant. Inside it, a pit descended into darkness, so absolute his light could not penetrate it. From within that pit came a sound, not breathing, laughing, soft, slow, waited centuries to wake. Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped back. The darkness inside the pit shifted. A massive hand, larger than the one he had seen in the attic, older, more decayed, rose from the depths, gripping the edge of the sigil and pulling itself upward. Daniel staggered backward until his shoulders struck the cold stone wall, the shock of the impact forcing air from his lungs. The massive decayed hand continued climbing from the pit, fingers like broken branches clawing into the sigil-carved stone. Its skin looked leathery and shrunken, stretched across bone in ways that defied human anatomy, and from its joints seeped a faint mist that curled upward like a living shadow. The air around Daniel tightened, vibrating with the low, guttural rumble rising from the pit's depths. Something colossal was waking. The pendant pulsed violently in his fist, flashes of pale light searing between his fingers. The glow illuminated the chamber for the briefest moment, revealing the enormity of the thing that lurked below. Daniel glimpsed another hand, then the suggestion of a face far beneath the pit's opening, hollow and staring, its features shifting like melting wax. He stumbled away, heart roaring in his chest. The creature pulled again, its weight cracking the stone rim of the pit. Shards of ancient rock fell into the darkness, swallowed instantly by the endless void. The rumbling grew louder, shaking loose dust from the ceiling beams. Daniel raised the pendant instinctively, though he had no idea what to do with it. The symbol engraved into its surface seemed to writhe under the frantic pulse of light. "Stop!" he whispered, though the word came out broken. "Please stop." The creature did not stop. Its second hand emerged fully now, gripping the floor with immense force. The sigil beneath it flickered as faint lines of light pushed back against the intrusion. The symbol was fighting, resisting, but its energy had faded over centuries. The creature's fingertips pressed deeper into the stone until fresh cracks raced through the chamber floor. Daniel scrambled backward. His flashlight beam trembled wildly as he focused on the far wall, searching for another way out. There was none. The collapsed corridor sealed one path. The staircase leading to the attic lay in the opposite direction, but the creature was between him and freedom. He swallowed hard. He had only one option: move now or die here. The creature's head began to rise into view. Its skull was stretched long, with hollow cavities where eyes should have been. Its mouth, a lipless gash, hung open in an eternal scream. The sound that poured from it was not a roar, but a resonance, an echo of countless voices layered into one agonized breath. Daniel felt the vibration under his skin, rattling his bones. He pressed the pendant to his chest and ran. The creature's hand swiped blindly across the chamber. The wind from its movement slammed Daniel into the wall, knocking the air from his lungs again. He fell to his knees, stones cracked under the impact. "Get up!" he told himself. Get up now. He forced his legs to respond, sprinting along the chamber edge as the creature pulled itself higher. He ducked beneath a falling beam as the ceiling trembled. Dust rained over him like gray snow. He nearly tripped over a broken chain embedded in the dirt. The pendant vibrated, growing warm, hot in his grasp. Daniel risked a glance. Its light was no longer flickering. It was burning brighter with each passing second. The symbol engraved on its surface blazed like molten metal. A sound rose in the chamber, not from the creature, from behind Daniel. Daniel turned sharply. A shimmer moved through the air, faint and trembling, coalescing into form. Her form, Lillian. She appeared near the collapsed corridor, her body flickering in and out like a candle struggling against the wind. She stepped forward, arms trembling as she lifted a single hand toward him. Daniel, her voice was stronger this time, though threaded with pain. The sigil, she whispered. The seal is breaking. You must complete it. I don't know how. Daniel choked out. Tell me what to do. She pointed toward the ancient markings on the chamber wall. Symbols Daniel had noticed earlier, but not recognized. Spirals, slashes, circles, some broken, some faded, but their pattern now glowed faintly, responding to the pendant's light. It feeds on absence, she said, on memories, on the hollowed parts of those it consumes. Strengthen the sigil, complete the lines, restore what was lost. The creature heaved upward again, its massive torso now pressed against the pit's rim. Its mouth widened, releasing a sound that felt like despair manifest. Daniel ran to the wall. He inspected the markings. Many had fractured over time, broken by age or the creature's attempts to escape. The pendant vibrated when he approached certain symbols, guiding him to the missing pieces. He lifted the pendant and pressed it to the first broken line. Light erupted, a searing beam that connected the fractured symbol and restored it instantly. The line glowed with renewed strength. The chamber shook violently as the creature reacted, its arms clawing against the reinforced seal. Daniel moved quickly to the next symbol, then the next. Each touch of the pendant sent waves of power through the ground. The glow expanded across the chamber floor, linking broken sigils into a continuous circle. Dust swirled wildly as ancient power returned. The creature shrieked. Daniel stumbled backward as its hand lunged again, but the newly strengthened sigil flared with brilliant light. The creature's fingers hit the barrier like stone, cracking backward at impossible angles. It recoiled, twisting its head toward Daniel with hollow fury. Finish it, Lillian urged. Daniel found the final broken marking near the pit. He dashed toward it, just as the creature swung one massive arm. The air split around him with a thunderous crack. Daniel dove onto the floor, sliding across the dirt. He reached the final symbol and slammed the pendant down. A burst of blinding white light filled the chamber. The sigil roared to life, every line blazing like liquid fire. The creature screamed, its body contorting violently. Shadows peeled away from its limbs like burning cloth. Its decayed skin cracked and dissolved into ash. It grasped desperately at the pit's edge, but the force dragging it downward was too strong. The entire chamber shook as the creature was pulled back into the darkness. Its scream echoed, growing distant. Then, silence. The light faded slowly, dust settled, the ground cooled, only the faint glow of the complete sigil remained. Daniel collapsed to his knees, shaking uncontrollably. He looked up, searching for Lillian. She stood nearby, shimmering faintly, her face softer than before. "You did it," she whispered. Daniel exhaled. "Is it over?" For now, her form dimmed. "Thank you, Daniel." He reached toward her, but she dissolved into pale light, drifting upward toward the attic above, leaving him alone in the chamber, surrounded by silence and the fading warmth of the restored seal. Silence settled over the underground chamber like a shroud, thick and absolute. Daniel remained on his knees, palms pressed into the cold dirt, as if the earth itself steadied him. His breath came in shaky waves, but the oppressive weight that had suffocated the chamber moments earlier had lifted. The sigil's glow flickered faintly, like embers after a dying fire. Daniel stared at it, half expecting the monstrous hand to rise again, half convinced the darkness below still pulsed with hunger, but no movement came. He forced himself to stand. His legs trembled beneath him, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. The pendant hung heavily from his fingers now, its earlier molten brightness dimmed to a soft, steady pulse. As he raised it, the light revealed clouds of dust drifting through the air, settling slowly over the chamber like snow. The scene felt eerily peaceful, as if the horror of minutes before had been erased. But Daniel knew better. Something this old, this powerful, did not die easily. The seal might hold it for now, but Lillian's warning echoed through him. For now, he turned toward the corner where she had vanished. Only empty air remained. No shimmer, no trace of her presence. His chest tightened. A wave of cold grief washed through him. He whispered her name, but the chamber swallowed his voice. He had saved her, or at least a part of her. Yet something in her fading gaze told him there were pieces of her still trapped, scattered through walls and shadows. The creature had fed on her, fragmented her, and though he had weakened its hold, she remained bound to the house. Daniel took a step toward the staircase leading out, but stopped abruptly. A new sound echoed faintly through the chamber. A whisper, faint, fragile, almost apologetic. "Daniel," he spun around. His flashlight beam sliced across stone walls, sigil-marked floors, and settling dust, but nothing moved. No ghostly silhouette, no shifting form. But he felt her. Lillian's presence brushed against him like a cold fingertip tracing the air near his cheek. Not visible, but real, nearby, watching, trying to speak. Daniel clenched his jaw. "I'm here," he whispered. "Tell me what's left." A soft pressure touched his shoulder, like a memory of warmth. Then a sigh drifted past him, weightless and hollow. The seal, weak, not enough. Daniel tightened his grip on the pendant. He looked back at the sigil. Though lit, its glow pulsed unevenly. Cracks still cut through the floor, thin as veins. Whatever force had dragged the creature back into the abyss now strained to hold it. "How do I strengthen it further?" he asked aloud. No answer came. Instead, the chamber lights shifted. His flashlight dimmed briefly, then steadied. The air stirred, pulling faint currents of dust toward the staircase, the only exit. She wanted him to go, or needed him to. Daniel took one last look at the pit. Its darkness no longer shifted, but deep within it, he sensed movement, slow, rhythmic, patient. The creature was gathering its strength. He hurried toward the stairs. Each step upward felt heavier than the last. His breath echoed sharply in the narrow wooden tunnel, the walls too tight, the ceiling too low. Halfway up, he paused to catch his breath. Something whispered below him, a scraping sound like bone against stone. Daniel climbed faster. He emerged into the attic with a gasp, pulling himself through the trapdoor and slamming it shut behind him. Dust scattered across the floorboards in a pale cloud. The attic looked unchanged, dark, thick with silence, corners bloated with shadows, but the air now vibrated faintly, as if the entire house felt the seal's temporary strength. Daniel stepped backward, letting his eyes adjust. The pendant pulsed again, pointing weakly toward the far wall, but instead of guiding him to danger, it felt more like reassurance. "You're still here," he whispered. A faint shimmer flickered near the window. Lillian's form struggling to maintain shape. She appeared only for a second, enough for him to see the curve of her shoulders, the hollow of her cheek, the long strands of hair drifting like fog. Her gaze held gratitude and warning. The house trembled. Daniel staggered forward, gripping his desk for balance. A low groan rippled through the beams above, followed by a soft thump from somewhere deep inside the walls. The sound grew louder, spreading through the house like something crawling through wooden ribs. He looked toward the attic door. The hallway beyond remained dark, but Daniel felt a presence moving along its length. Something small, many small things. Footsteps, not heavy like before, but light scattering, scampering, racing across the floorboards. He lifted the pendant. Its pulse quickened. From the hallway, dozens of whispering voices rose at once, faint, confused, pleading, "Help us!" Daniel's breath caught. These were not the voices of monsters. They were human, young, old, fractured, echoes of people the house had consumed over centuries, trapped between its walls. He stepped toward the door, drawn to them despite the cold fear gripping his spine. As he reached out, the whispers rose sharply. "Don't go! It's awake!" Daniel froze. The hall darkened even further. Something thick and shapeless blocked the far end, an enormous shadow stretching across the walls, moving without sound or form. The creature's influence, even sealed, it still seeped through cracks of memory, reaching into the house's deepest layers. Daniel stepped back. The pendant dimmed, then brightened suddenly in a single sharp flash. A message, not words, but something clearer. He turned sharply toward the attic desk. Papers lay scattered across it. His writing notebook, the torn journal binding he had found earlier, and loose sheets Lillian once wrote on. Now, as if touched by an unseen wind, the pages lifted slightly and slid across the wood, aligning into a pattern. Daniel approached, scratched onto one of the pages. Faint but visible were 3 words written in shaky strokes. "Find my story." Daniel frowned. "Lillian, You want me to read your journal? The pendant pulsed once, affirmative. He scanned the sheets of paper that remained. Many were blank, others contained fragmented lines, sentences half-finished, thoughts scribbled in panic. But one entry caught his attention, written in hurried, slanted handwriting. It comes when the house is silent. It listens through the walls. It feeds on fear, on loss, on the parts of us that ache. I hear footsteps above me, but there is nothing above me. Nothing human. If someone finds this, know that it doesn't just eat people, it eats memories. Pieces of us remain in the dark. The rest becomes it. Daniel exhaled shakily. The creature wasn't just physical, it devoured identity, leaving only fragments behind. Lillian's spirit, her shimmering presence. Those were the scraps left of her mind, fighting to remain whole. The footsteps in the hallway grew closer. A soft knock tapped the attic door. Daniel lifted the pendant. "Lillian," he whispered. "What do I do? Tell me how to stop it completely." The shimmer returned faint, wavering, but she managed to form her face long enough to speak. "Find where it began." Daniel stared at her. "The lodge, the basement." She shook her head, hair drifting like smoke. "Older." The shadows behind her surged forward, swallowing her form. "Lillian." The attic lights flickered violently. A deep rumble rose from the floor, deeper than before, shaking the entire house. The seal was breaking again. Daniel grabbed the journal pages, stuffed them inside his coat, and clutched the pendant tightly. He had only one chance to end this, one chance to find the creature's true origin before it crawled free of the pit below and consumed everything left of the house, including Lillian. And he knew exactly where he had to go. Down! Deeper than the cellar, beneath the foundations, into whatever lay buried long before the house was built, into the dark that remembered everything it had eaten and waited for more. The house groaned above Daniel as if it sensed his resolve, its beams shuddering with an ancient, restless breath. Dust drifted from the rafters in thin ribbons, catching the faint glow of his flashlight as he moved across the attic floor. Every board beneath his feet vibrated as though something below pushed upward in slow, deliberate pulses. The seal was weakening, the creature was stirring again, and Lillian's final warning echoed through him like a pulse. Older. Daniel knelt at the center of the attic, the pendant held tightly in his fist. The air around him felt charged, humming softly as if a current ran through the house's bones. He could hear whispers weaving through the walls, voices fractured, pleading, almost inaudible. Find where it began. Daniel looked around the attic, scanning the beams overhead, the trapdoor beneath him, the cracked walls that had endured decades of storms. The house itself was old, built on the remains of the hunting lodge, but Lillian had meant something older, something beneath even that, something buried. He lifted the pendant, letting its faint light guide his gaze. The glow flickered, dimmed, then swelled when he pointed it toward the far corner of the attic floor. Daniel walked toward it slowly, each step heavy with dread. The floorboards there looked no different from the others, but something lay beneath them, a void, a hollow echo he had not noticed before. Daniel crouched down. He pressed his ear to the floor. A faint rhythmic thud pulsed from below, slow, ancient, like a buried heartbeat. His breath caught. He reached for a loose board and pried it up. It lifted with surprising ease, as if it wanted to be removed. Beneath the board lay a layer of rotted cloth and old splintered wood, a surface older than the house itself. Daniel peeled the cloth back. Underneath, carved into the original wood, was a symbol, a perfect circle, bisected down the middle. The same symbol on the pendant. His pulse quickened. He ran his fingers across the carving, the grooves worn smooth from age. The instant he touched it, the wood vibrated beneath his fingertips, and the air in the attic shifted. A hollow wind rose from the floor as though the house exhaled deeply. The whispers that haunted the walls grew louder, voices overlapping, growing frantic. Don't open it. It's not ready. It's waking. Daniel flinched but did not pull back. His instinct screamed to stop, but something deeper, something quieter told him he needed to continue. He lifted another board, then another. Beneath each one, the same symbol repeated, painted or carved, forming a spreading ring, a ritual circle, not to summon something, to bury it. Daniel's chest tightened. This house, this attic, this was the true anchor, not the cellar, not the lodge beneath it. This circle was the first seal, older than the house that stood on top of it, and time had nearly erased it. A sudden vibration shook the floor. Daniel stumbled back as the boards trembled violently. From the trapdoor behind him came a deep, guttural moan rising from the cellar, from the pit, from the depths beneath. It was waking faster now. Daniel pulled the pendant out fully, letting it shine across the exposed symbols. Its dim glow brightened, responding to the markings like a key linking with a lock. The engravings pulsed faintly. He could restore them. He had to. He placed the pendant onto the center of the largest symbol. The moment metal touched wood, a shockwave burst outward. Daniel gasped as a bright ring of light rippled across the exposed boards, racing through the symbols like fire along oil. The attic lit up in blinding white. Dust lifted from the floor in spirals. Shadows fled to the corners of the room. For one fragile moment, everything was still. Then the house screamed. A deep, resonant howl tore through the walls, shaking the beams violently. The trapdoor slammed open behind him, flinging dust into the air. A force like a rushing wind exploded upward from below, throwing Daniel across the attic. He landed hard against the far wall, breath bursting from his lungs. He scrambled to his knees. From the trapdoor rose a darkness so dense it swallowed the light around it. It poured upward like smoke but moved with purpose, tendrils stretching across the ceiling before snapping downward like claws. The light from the pendant dimmed under its shadow. Daniel, the voices whispered, not one, not dozens, hundreds, overlapping cries. Trapped souls, help us. Daniel staggered to his feet. The pendant burned in his palm, hotter than before, but he refused to let go. The darkness surged toward him. He held the pendant high, its light straining to push back the void, but the darkness did not recoil. It hesitated only slightly, then continued pressing forward. The attic floor cracked beneath Daniel's feet, the ritual circle beneath the boards shaking under the creature's presence. The symbols flickered, weakening already. No, Daniel gasped. Not again. Not this fast. A sudden shimmer formed in the air beside him. He turned. Lillian stood there faint, flickering heavily, as though the effort to appear drained the last remnants of her strength. Her hair drifted in slow motion, her eyes hollow yet filled with desperate determination. "You must rewrite the seal," she whispered hoarsely. "Complete the pattern, restore the circle, all of it." "I don't know how," Daniel cried. Her form flickered violently, her voice strained. "The house remembers. Listen to it." The darkness surged again, slamming against an invisible barrier a foot from Daniel's chest. The force pushed him backward, his heel hitting a broken board. He looked down. Symbols, dozens of them, lay hidden beneath the floor, forming a vast circular design, some intact, others faded, many broken. He understood. The pendant alone wasn't enough. The circle must be restored physically by hand, through intention, not just ritual. Daniel dropped to his knees. He swept dust aside, revealing broken carvings and half-erased lines. He reached into his pocket, grabbed a broken piece of sharp wood, and began carving. Every line he drew pulsed faintly, linking with the pendant's glow. The darkness shrieked. Tendrils lashed at him, splintering wood, tearing through the air. Daniel ducked, carving faster, tracing old grooves, repairing broken rings. Sweat dripped down his face. The ground vibrated dangerously. Lillian knelt beside him, guiding his hand with shimmering fingers that passed through the wood like mist, but left the faintest impression of direction. "Here," she urged, "and here. Don't stop. It's coming." Daniel carved desperately. The circle brightened, expanding outward, fighting the creeping void. The darkness gathered itself into a single massive wave and hurled forward. Daniel screamed as he slashed the final connecting line into the wood. The attic exploded with light. A shockwave blasted outward, slamming the darkness back into the trapdoor. The house roared as ancient power surged through every beam and nail. The ritual circle ignited brilliant, perfect, whole. The darkness shrieked an agonized, fractured sound as it was pulled downward, like water draining. Tendrils clawed at the air, grasping for anything to hold, but the radiance consumed them, dragging them through the trapdoor and sealing it shut with a deafening crack. Silence followed. Daniel collapsed forward, hands gripping the newly carved seal. The pendant cooled against his chest. The air in the attic softened. Shadows retreated. A faint shimmer hovered beside him. Lillian knelt quietly, her expression calm, peaceful for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered. Her form glowed softly brighter, cleaner, no longer strained by the house's pull. "Am I free?" Daniel met her gaze, tears filling his eyes. "I hope so." She reached out, touching his cheek with a hand made of light. "You gave me back my voice." Her form brightened and slowly dissolved into drifting specks of soft white light. Daniel bowed his head as the last of her faded. For the first time since he entered the house, the silence felt like relief, but he knew the story was not over. The circle was restored, but what lay beneath it was not destroyed, only sleeping, and somewhere deep within the foundation, the ancient pit stirred. The attic felt heavier after Lillian's light faded, as if her departure left a hollow space the house did not know how to fill. Daniel stood alone at the center of the restored ritual circle, his breathing deep but uneven, each inhale catching on the lingering cold drifting up from the sealed trapdoor. The wooden boards beneath him still pulsed faintly, with a warmth that did not belong to the house, but to something older, something awakened by the completed symbols. Yet beneath that warmth, Daniel sensed another movement, slow, distant, methodical. The creature was not dead. It was retreating, recovering, waiting. Daniel wiped the sweat and dust from his face, then forced himself to step away from the circle. The attic floor creaked beneath his boots. Every shadow along the beams above felt sharper, more aware. The house watched him now, quietly measuring him in the absence of Lillian's presence. He reached for the pendant hanging around his neck. Its metal cooled to a steady, gentle pulse. Unlike the panic-bright glow from before, it now felt calm, almost thoughtful, as if guiding instead of warning. He whispered into the silence, "Where do I go next?" No voice answered, but something shifted inside him. Intuition fueled by Lillian's final words. Older, he had sealed the creature. For now, he had restored the ancient circle. But that was only a patch over a rotted foundation. Whatever was buried beneath the house was older than any human construction, older than memory. And if the house was merely built atop a deeper wound, then the true source rested somewhere below, beneath the pit, beneath the cellar, beneath the earth itself. Daniel walked to the attic window. The glass was fogged by the cold wind outside, but he could still see the faint outline of the forest behind the property. Tall black trees swayed like shadowed sentinels between their trunks. The earth dipped downward into darkness. Something had been buried out there, something the lodgemen feared enough to carve sigils and build walls and seal pits. Daniel shuddered. The pendant pulsed again, as if agreeing. He left the attic, descending the wooden stairs. The entire house seemed to exhale as he stepped onto each creaking board. Whispers trailed faintly from the walls, softer than before, less frantic. They no longer begged, but murmured like restless echoes, unsure of where to go now that the immediate danger had passed. When he reached the front hall, the cold night air seeped in through the cracks around the door. Daniel grabbed his coat, flashlight, and a rusted lantern he found near the entryway. The glass was cracked, but the oil inside was still usable. He lit it, surprised at how steady the flame burned despite the draft. He opened the front door. The night outside swallowed him instantly. The wind tore through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hint of a scream, but not human, not entirely. Daniel forced himself forward, boots crunching over dead leaves as he walked toward the tree line. The house behind him groaned once, as though reluctant to let him go. Then it fell silent. The forest was darker than he expected. The trees here were older than any he had seen near town. Their roots twisted across the ground in tangled patterns, like veins pushing through the earth. Moss clung to their bark in thick strips. The deeper Daniel walked, the more the air seemed to change, losing its sharp winter bite and replacing it with something stale, humid, and ancient. His lantern flickered. The pendant pulsed. He followed its rhythm. After several minutes, he noticed the ground sloping downward. The forest floor dipped into a wide hollow where the moonlight barely reached. The air tasted metallic again. Daniel stepped carefully, scanning the hollow with his flashlight. Something was buried here, or had been. He descended into the hollow. At its center lay a mound of earth shaped like a long, collapsed dome. The soil was uneven, disturbed too recently, disturbed for a place this forgotten. Thick roots sprawled over the mound like skeletal fingers. As Daniel drew closer, the pendant grew warm, a slow, pulsing heat that radiated through his chest. He knelt and brushed away loose dirt. A symbol lay carved into the soil beneath a circle divided by a vertical line. The same symbol, but older, rougher, carved directly into the earth, long before the lodge or house existed. Daniel's pulse quickened. He dug deeper with his hands, pushing aside rocks and clumps of moss. More symbols appeared, spirals, slashes, crossed lines, all etched into the ground in a pattern far larger than the attic ritual circle. The carvings stretched outward across the hollow, forming a circle that wrapped around the entire clearing. This was the first seal, and it was breaking. A low tremor pulsed through the earth beneath him. Daniel staggered backward, nearly dropping his lantern. The ground beneath the mound shifted, sinking a fraction of an inch. A crack appeared near its center, thin at first, then widening as the soil pulled apart. Daniel held the pendant tightly. No, not again. The crack split open further, revealing a hollow chamber beneath the mound. Stale air rushed upward, carrying a scent of decay so thick it made Daniel gag. He covered his mouth and shone the flashlight into the opening. Below, carved into the chamber walls, were dozens of human shapes, figures etched into the dirt, their faces stretched, their mouths open in silent screams. The carvings were not symbolic. They were impressions, as if people had been pressed into the earth, captured, consumed. Daniel recoiled, stumbling back across the hollow floor. The pendant flared again. A deep rumble shook the clearing. Loose dirt fell into the opening. Daniel watched in horror as the carved faces shifted not in the flicker of the light, but in reality. Their mouths widened. Their hollow eyes sank deeper. A faint whisper rose from the chamber below. Daniel, he froze. Not Lillian's voice. Something deeper, older. A longing voice. A hungry voice. The soil around the opening began to sink downward, collapsing into the chamber. Daniel scrambled away as the entire mound shifted and split. Roots snapped like wires. Stones cracked. The hole widened into a massive pit. From its depths rose a sound like breath. Slow, ancient, awakening. Daniel backed up the slope, heart pounding so violently he felt dizzy. No, you're sealed. You're trapped. You can't. but the words died on his tongue. A long, skeletal arm rose from the pit, much larger than the one in the cellar, older, rotted, dripping with earth. Its fingers clawed at the air, searching, pulling, rising. The first seal had broken. Daniel turned and ran, sprinting through the forest, branches cutting his arms, roots tripping his feet. Behind him, the mound shook violently. The whisper followed him through the trees. Daniel, Daniel, it's time. He burst from the forest, stumbling onto the clearing behind the house. He collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air, staring at the trembling tree line. The creature was no longer beneath the house. It was rising from the earth itself. The seals were failing, and Daniel knew then what the pendant had been guiding him toward. He wasn't meant to reseal the creature. He was meant to finish what the first seal had failed to do, to destroy it. But how do you destroy something that remembers every soul it has consumed? Daniel rose slowly, his knees shaking. The wind howled through the trees, carrying echoes of long-lost voices. He clutched the pendant and whispered to the darkness, "I'm not running anymore." Daniel stood in the clearing behind the house, chest heaving, lungs burning with every gasp of cold night air. The forest trembled behind him, as if the earth itself rebelled against what had just awakened. He wiped mud and sweat from his face, but his hands continued to shake with an uncontrollable tremor. The mound had cracked open. The first seal had failed, and the creature had risen far enough to touch the world again. The ancient earth still moved in slow, shuddering waves, as though breathing out centuries of buried dread. The wind howled, cutting across the clearing like a blade. Daniel turned back toward the house, its silhouette looming dark against the sky. Every window was black. Every shadow seemed to ripple with tension. It knew, the house knew something greater than itself had stirred. The whispers that once echoed through its walls were gone now, replaced with a heavy silence that felt almost sentient. Daniel clenched the pendant in his hand. Its glow had dimmed back to a low pulse, steady and patient, like a heartbeat guiding him forward. He could almost feel it thinking, responding to his fear, trying to steady him. The creature had risen from the earth. The seal beneath the house held it partially, but the first seal had failed entirely. If he did nothing, it would rise again stronger, hungrier, unstoppable. He forced himself toward the back steps of the house. The wooden boards creaked sharply under his boots, as though protesting his return. He opened the door and stepped inside. The air was colder. The walls felt colder. A thin mist curled along the floor, as if the fog outside had seeped indoors. Daniel lifted his flashlight, its beam slicing through the dark in shaky arcs. The house groaned once, a long, low exhale that felt more like pain than structural shifting. He walked into the hallway. Every portrait on the walls, old black and white photographs of families from decades past, had changed. Their eyes were hollowed out, their faces stretched into long, silent screams. Daniel stepped closer to one frame, holding the pendant up to inspect it. The image flickered. For a brief second, the screaming face shifted back to normal. then morphed again, becoming something twisted, carved by fear. Daniel stepped back. "It's feeding," he whispered. "It's already feeding." A thud echoed above him, then another, slow, heavy, rhythmic. Footsteps on the second floor. Daniel tightened his grip on the pendant. The footsteps grew louder, descending the staircase with deliberate force. He raised the flashlight. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. At first, Daniel's breath caught in his throat because it looked human. A man, tall, wearing old-fashioned clothes covered in dust and soil, but the way he moved was wrong. His body shifted in slightly delayed motions, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. His head snapped toward Daniel, and his neck cracked loudly with the movement. His face was blank, no eyes, no mouth, no features, just smooth skin pulled tight over the shape of a skull. Daniel stumbled back. The faceless figure stopped at the bottom step and lifted one arm, pointing toward the living room. Then it turned and walked away with stiff, unnatural steps. Daniel's breath froze. It was guiding him. But why? With no other path forward, he followed. The living room was dark except for a faint amber glow emanating from the fireplace. Daniel stepped closer. Inside the hearth, flames burned without wood, rising from a circle of ash laid across the stone. Strange symbols were carved around the hearth's edge, some familiar from the attic, others entirely new. The fire hissed with every flicker. Daniel crouched and held the pendant over the flame. The fire rose suddenly, illuminating the room in blinding orange light. Shadows danced wildly across the walls. The pendant vibrated. The flames shifted color, orange to blue, blue to white, white to black. A distorted whisper echoed through the room. Daniel, his chest tightened. Lillian, the flames twisted upward, forming the faint outline of a woman's face, eyes wide, mouth parted as if trying to speak. Smoke curled around the shape, making it flicker. Her voice came out broken, fragmented. "Not safe, not here. The ground remembers." Daniel leaned closer. "Tell me how to stop it." The apparition's mouth moved, but only a hollow whisper escaped. "The heart, the first wound." Buried under, the flames exploded outward in a violent burst of black smoke. Daniel fell backward, coughing, covering his face as soot and ash filled the room. The pendant grew hot, too hot. He dropped to one knee, gasping. A low rumble moved through the foundation. The house shook. Pictures crashed from the walls. Furniture rattled. The floor buckled upward in places. Daniel stumbled to his feet, grabbing the nearest wall for support. The shaking grew stronger, accompanied by a deep bass hum like something massive shifting beneath the house. Then, a single, thunderous heartbeat pulsed through the floorboards. Daniel froze. Another heartbeat followed, slow, heavy, ancient, and far beneath the house. Daniel's eyes widened. The heart, the wound, it's beneath the foundation. He needed to go deeper than the cellar, deeper than the pit, to the true burial site, the creature's origin, the wound in the earth where it had first taken shape. The shaking ceased abruptly. Silence swallowed the house. Daniel moved toward the basement door. As he reached for the handle, he heard a soft whimper from behind him. He turned sharply. A small child stood in the doorway, a boy no older than 7, with dark hair and pale skin. His eyes shimmered with tears, his small frame trembling. "Help!" the boy choked. "Please, help me." Daniel stepped forward instinctively. "It's okay, I'm here. Are you trapped in this house too?" The boy shook his head. Then his mouth stretched into a wide, impossibly long grin. A second mouth opened beneath it, then another. His skin rippled as dozens of small hands pushed against it from the inside. The boy's form contorted, ripping open as a swirling mass of shadow burst outward. Daniel hurled himself aside as the creature lunged. It hit the wall with a deafening crack, then twisted toward him again, limbs reshaping into spiked protrusions. Daniel raised the pendant. It flared with white fire. The shadow creature shrieked and recoiled, its form unraveling like torn cloth in the wind. It dissolved completely, leaving only silence. Daniel's hands trembled violently. He had no time to rest. He ran to the basement door, threw it open, and descended the stairs 2 at a time. The cellar smelled of damp earth and old rot. The pit beneath the sigil glowed faintly, but Daniel did not stop there. He moved to the back wall, one part of the cellar that remained untouched. The pendant pulsed hard. Daniel pressed his hand against the wall. It cracked instantly. Dirt poured through the opening. Cold air surged from the darkness behind it. Daniel stepped back as the entire wall collapsed, revealing a hidden tunnel carved deep beneath the house. The tunnel sloped downward, far steeper than the one from the trapdoor. A cold wind howled from its depths. The creature's heartbeat pulsed louder. Daniel tightened his grip on the pendant. "This ends tonight," he whispered, and he stepped into the tunnel toward the heart of the earth, toward the creature's true beginning. The tunnel swallowed Daniel in absolute darkness, its walls narrowing as he moved deeper into the earth. His lantern cast a trembling circle of golden light ahead of him, but it barely penetrated the thick gloom. The pendant at his chest pulsed steadily, guiding him onward through the winding descent. The deeper he went, the more the air changed. The cold grew sharper, pressing into his bones, and the smell of wet soil thickened into something metallic, almost like blood. Behind him, the faint glow of the cellar had vanished entirely. The tunnel now felt cut off from the rest of the world, as if he had stepped into a place forgotten by time. He moved slowly, every step deliberate, listening to the grinding echo of his boots on dirt and stone. The walls around him seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a rhythm too slow to be human. The heartbeat grew louder, a deep, steady thump that rattled the loose stones beneath him. It reverberated upward through his legs, crawling through his chest, making his own pulse stumble. The tunnel curved sharply, and Daniel followed, his lantern flickering wildly as if frightened by what lay ahead. The pendant flared suddenly. Daniel froze. The tunnel opened into a cavern. He stepped forward cautiously, lifting the lantern high. The cavern was enormous, its walls stretching far beyond the reach of his light. The air was warmer here, humid and heavy with a scent of ancient decay. The ground beneath him was uneven, covered with strange patterns carved directly into the earth. Spirals, lines, circles intersecting with circles, a ritual space. Older than the house, older than the lodge, older than anything Daniel had seen. He stepped closer to the center of the cavern. The ground dipped into a massive crater, circular and deep, its walls etched with symbols similar to those in the attic. Only these were more complex, more violent, carved with desperation or madness. At the center of the crater was a pool of dark, viscous liquid that rippled like tar. The heartbeat came from within the pool. Daniel's knees weakened. The sight felt wrong on every level, unnatural, impossible. Something living pulsed beneath that tar-like surface, something vast. He stepped closer, lantern trembling in his grip. As he approached the rim of the crater, he saw impressions in the ground shallow, vague but unmistakable. Human figures, dozens of them, bodies pressed into the earth. Their outlines stretched unnaturally long, as if they had been dragged into the pool. He swallowed hard. His breath fogged the air, though it was warm here. This is where it started. The pendant pulsed in his hand, and then the tar shifted. A ripple moved across the surface, slow and deliberate. Daniel took a step back, raising the lantern. The liquid parted as something pushed upward from beneath. Not a hand, not a limb, an eye, a massive, lidless eye, the color of rotting bone. It stared at him, pupil dilating in the lantern's glow. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. The eye blinked sideways, membrane sliding across its surface with a sickening, wet sound. Then the pool erupted. A column of tar burst upward, forming a towering shape in the center of the crater. Daniel stumbled back and fell to the dirt as the shape twisted, stretching into something vaguely human. Too tall, too thin, its limbs bending in ways bones never should. The creature's head tilted down toward him, and it spoke, not with a voice, with every voice it had ever consumed. Daniel, his name echoed through the cavern, layered with dozens of tones, men, women, children, some whispering, some screaming, some laughing. His ears rang with the force of it. The creature took a step toward him, its foot sinking into the tar that clung to it like skin. Daniel forced himself to his feet. You were buried here. The lodge sealed you. The house trapped you. Why? The creature's head twitched violently. Its elongated mouth opened, splitting jaggedly across its face. A distorted chorus spilled out. Hungry. Daniel stepped back, gripping the pendant. You can't feed anymore. I sealed the attic. I repaired the circle. The cavern trembled. The creature's arms stretched outward, impossibly long, reaching across the crater. It touched the cavern walls, and the symbols carved there glowed faintly in response. The heartbeat pulsed stronger. The seal is broken. Daniel shook his head. No, I repaired it. The creature lifted one arm. Its long, tar-drenched finger pointed upward toward the ceiling of the cavern, toward the earth above. Daniel's flashlight beam followed the gesture. His blood ran cold. Cracks, dozens of them. The restored seal in the attic had forced the entity downward. But the first seal breaking had weakened the ancient structure beneath. The creature was rising from the center of the earth itself, not trapped, not sealed, just slowed. Daniel's heart pounded. pounded. "Tell me how to stop you." The creature twisted its head in a slow, unnatural circle. The swirling tar at its base thickened. Its voices shifted, layering into something almost coherent. "You cannot stop hunger." Daniel's grip tightened on the pendant until the metal dug into his skin. Lillian said, "The ground remembers. There must be a way." The cavern lights flickered. Shadows crawled along the walls, shifting in frantic patterns. The carved impressions in the dirt began to hum softly. Daniel stepped closer to one of them, an outline of a human figure pressed into the soil. His lantern illuminated its face. It was Lillian. Before he could react, the tar pool surged. A hand shot out, skeletal, dripping, grasping. Daniel jumped aside as it slammed into the ground inches from where he stood. The creature roared, a sound so loud the cavern shook, pebbles raining from the ceiling. Daniel ran. He sprinted along the rim of the crater, heart pounding, lungs burning. The creature lashed out with its elongated arms, smashing into the earth behind him. Tar splattered across the ground, sizzling where it landed. Daniel slipped, but caught himself on a jagged rock. His flashlight fell, breaking open on impact. Darkness swallowed the cavern, except for the pendant. It glowed brighter than ever, a pure white light, pulsing faster, stronger, almost frantic. Daniel held it high. The creature recoiled, its tar skin bubbling where the light touched its surface. Daniel shouted, "What are you afraid of? What does this pendant do?" The pendant answered. A blast of light erupted from it, so bright Daniel had to look away. The creature screamed, truly screamed for the first time. Its voices fractured, splitting apart into thousands of scattering echoes. Its limbs writhed violently, tar peeling away in strips that dissolved before hitting the ground. The crater shook under its weight. Then Daniel saw it. At the center of the tar creature's chest, a wound, a round, hollow cavity glowing faintly with the same symbol carved into the earth. The heart, the first wound. He didn't need Lillian to tell him. He knew. Daniel charged. The creature lunged in response, but its movements were sluggish under the pendant's light. He dodged one dripping arm, rolled beneath another, and sprinted toward the glowing wound. The ground shook violently, sending him stumbling, but he kept moving. He reached its chest. The creature loomed above him, mouth splitting open in a void-like scream. Daniel lifted the pendant and drove it into the wound. Light exploded. The cavern walls shook violently, symbols igniting along the stone. The tar pool boiling beneath the creature's feet. The creature convulsed, limbs flailing, its form unraveling into streaks of shadow and molten darkness. Daniel screamed with the effort, forcing the pendant deeper as the creature shrieked, its many voices warping into a final bone-splitting howl. The wound widened, the creature collapsed inward, and everything went white. There was no sound at first. No scream, no rumble, not even the echo of Daniel's own breath. Only white, a vast, blinding expanse of white that erased the cavern, the creature, the earth, and even the memory of darkness. Daniel felt suspended in it, weightless, drifting through a silence so complete it seemed to swallow time itself. His body tingled as though pinned between waking and dreaming. He tried to move his hands, but he could not feel them. He tried to inhale, but he could not sense air. Then the whiteness fractured. Hairline cracks spread outward like lightning across a blank sky. The sound returned. A deep ringing in his ears, a distant roar, the sensation of falling. Daniel slammed onto solid ground. His lungs seized and then expanded in a ragged gasp. He curled forward, coughing violently as cold air flooded back into him. Dirt scraped against his palms. A faint metallic taste coated his tongue. The cavern had returned, sort of. Daniel pushed himself up, lantern flickering beside him. The walls around him were cracked and trembling, shifting like breathing flesh. The crater was still there, but the tar pool had receded, drained into fissures that glowed faintly with pale silver light. Smoke drifted through the air in thin spirals, illuminated by the lantern's glow. But the creature was gone, at least its physical form. Daniel wiped blood from his lip and scanned the cavern for any sign of movement. He heard nothing except the faint, rhythmic pulse vibrating through the stone, much softer now. Weaker, the heartbeat of the pit was fading. His hand flew to the pendant. It was still embedded in the wound of the creature. No, it was sitting in his palm, cool and dim. He did not remember retrieving it, yet here it was. Its symbol was cracked along one side, a thin fracture glowing faintly with inner light. He exhaled shakily. "I'm still alive." The cavern disagreed. A low groan rippled through the stone floor. Dust rained from above. Daniel stumbled back as a massive crack tore across the ground, running from one wall to the other. Symbols etched into the dirt flickered with frantic pulses before dimming completely. The cavern was collapsing. Daniel grabbed his lantern and sprinted toward the tunnel. Each footfall sent tremors through the unstable earth. Rocks crashed from the ceiling, smashing into the ground inches behind him. The tunnel ahead warped in and out of focus, as if the air itself bent around the force that had exploded from the creature. His lungs burned, his legs trembled, but he forced himself forward. The tunnel narrowed. Daniel squeezed through jagged stone, scraping skin from his arms. Behind him, the cavern roared, an explosion of collapsing earth and shrieking echoes of the creature's dying voice. The air pressure slammed into his back like a physical blow. He stumbled, nearly dropping the lantern, but managed to keep moving. He reached the final stretch of the tunnel. The cellar wall was visible, a faint rectangle of darkness ahead. The tunnel behind him split open with a deafening crack. Daniel dove toward the cellar, rolling across the stone floor as the tunnel collapsed entirely. A storm of dust and dirt surged past him, filling the basement with choking debris. He coughed violently, vision blurring. Then he heard it, a whisper, not from the creature. "Daniel." He lifted his head. Lillian stood near the edge of the cellar, her form clearer than before. Her hair drifted gently around her shoulders, her clothes shimmering with soft silver light. She didn't look pained or fragmented. She looked almost whole, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. "You destroyed it," she whispered. "But it is not gone." Daniel forced himself up. "I drove the pendant into its heart. It dissolved." The cavern collapsed. She stepped closer, shaking her head. Its body, not its memory. Daniel froze. What does that mean? Lillian's expression softened into something fragile. Grief-tinged, it lived on hunger and remembrance. Every soul it consumed, every fear it fed on, those are still buried in the earth. Its form was only the echo of what it had devoured. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, I ended this. I stopped it. You slowed it, she whispered, and you weakened it. But the root remains. The cellar trembled beneath them. The walls creaked. The boards above shuddered as though something curled beneath the floorboards. Daniel steadied himself, pulse racing. Tell me what I have to do. Lillian lifted her hand, pointing toward the staircase leading up into the house. You must return where it first touched your world. Daniel frowned. The attic. No, her voice cracked. Your memory, the first moment you heard it, the moment it chose you. Daniel felt cold seep through him. The footsteps on the ceiling, his very first night in the house. He had thought the creature began in the attic, but no, it began with him. It had reached for him long before he ever entered the cellar or the cavern. It had marked him, whispered to him, dragged him deeper through fear. You must sever the connection, Lillian said, or it will return in another form. Daniel swallowed hard. How? You must relive the moment it entered your world, and this time do not let it in. Daniel's skin prickled. He stared toward the stairs, dread twisting through his stomach. I have to go back up there. She nodded. Its memory is strongest where it first walked above you. The ceiling, the footsteps. Daniel tightened his grip on the pendant, feeling the crack along its surface. Its light pulsed weakly, but still alive. I'll finish it, he whispered. I'll end it for good. Lillian looked at him with something almost like pride. You are not like the others. You faced what they feared. You went where they would not. He took a step toward her. Will you be there? Her form flickered. Pieces of me remain, she whispered. I will guide you as long as I can. Before Daniel could respond, the cellar shook again, this time from above. A heavy thud pounded through the ceiling, then another, then a slow dragging sound. Footsteps, this time not echoing from memory. Something was walking through the house. Daniel looked up. Lillian's glow flickered violently. It is searching for its shape, she whispered, before it lost its form. It remembered you. Daniel's blood turned cold. The footsteps grew louder, closer, slow, deliberate, the same rhythm he had heard his first night. Then silence. Daniel stared up at the ceiling, heart in his throat. A long crack split the boards above him. Something whispered his name through the wood. Daniel. Not 100 voices, not a scream, just one, his own voice. Daniel staggered backward. Lillian's form wavered urgently. Go, now! He ran. He sprinted up the cellar stairs, every footfall echoing through the silent house. Shadows twisted along the walls. The boards groaned under invisible weight. As he reached the first floor, he heard the footsteps again, now on the ceiling directly above him. He moved toward the attic door. The house breathed around him. He forced the door open. The attic was dark, still, waiting. The footsteps stopped. Daniel stepped inside. Pendant raised, breath shallow. Then the footsteps resumed, but this time They walked upside down across the ceiling, straight toward him. The footsteps advanced across the ceiling with slow, deliberate precision, each step resonating through the beams like a drumbeat echoing inside Daniel's skull. The attic was silent except for that crawling rhythm, and Daniel felt his breath lock in his chest as he stared upward. His lantern's glow trembled, the light jittering across the wooden slats overhead. The footsteps stopped directly above him. Silence followed, heavy, total, as if the house itself waited for what came next. Daniel swallowed hard and took a step back. The pendant warmed against his chest. A soft pulse, a warning. The air in the attic thickened with pressure, warping the edges of Daniel's vision. Every instinct told him to run, to flee, to throw himself down the stairs and escape the weight pressing down from above. But Lillian's fading words whispered through him. The moment it chose you, the footsteps resumed. Only now Daniel saw the dents forming in the wooden boards above, sinking inward with each step as if something impossibly heavy walked upside down. Dust drifted down in gentle spirals. The shape moved toward the far corner of the attic, pacing the same route Daniel remembered hearing his first night here. His memory, his fear. This was the connection the creature clung to. Daniel's pulse hammered as he stepped forward. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The footsteps stopped. A crack split across the ceiling, long and jagged. Something pressed against the wood from the other side. A bulge formed, straining downward like a hand attempting to push through thick skin. Daniel raised the pendant. Its fractured line glowed weakly. The ceiling splintered, and the creature revealed the shape it had stolen. Daniel stared in horror. It was him. His own body crawled upside down across the ceiling, head twisting at an unnatural angle to look directly at him. The skin was pale, drained of color, stretched thin across the jaw. The eyes were black voids, no reflection, no light. The mouth gaped wide, splitting far past the limits of bone. The upside down Daniel smiled. "You let me in," it whispered, not with its mouth, but with Daniel's own voice ringing through the attic. Daniel staggered backward. The creature's limbs stretched, joints bending backward as it descended the beams like a twisted spider. Its movements were too fluid, too practiced, as if it had worn his shape long before he even arrived at the house. "You heard me," it continued. "That first night, you listened, and when you feared the footsteps, I grew." Daniel's hand shook as he raised the pendant. "You live on fear, but I'm not afraid anymore." The creature tilted its head, mockingly. "Then why is your heart screaming?" Daniel felt it rapid, violent beats pounding through his rib cage. He tried to steady his breath. The creature dropped from the ceiling in a single swift motion, landing silently on all fours. The floorboards didn't even groan under its weight. It crawled toward him, fast. Daniel lifted the pendant, and it flared weakly. The creature recoiled slightly, its skin sizzling where the light touched it. But the glow wasn't strong enough. Its crack had weakened it. The creature grinned again, its lips peeling back like rotted fabric. "You broke the seal," it whispered, "but you never broke me." Daniel took another step back, nearly tripping over a pile of old boxes. His flashlight flickered, its beam dimming. The creature crept closer, each movement accompanied by a sickening crack of joints shifting. "Fear is a doorway," it hissed. "You opened it for me." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Then I'll close it." He forced himself to step forward. The creature halted, surprised. Daniel held the pendant tightly, ignoring the sharp pain where the cracked symbol cut into his hand. "This ends where it began, in memory." He shut his eyes. Instantly, the attic dissolved. Darkness swallowed him whole. Not cold like the cavern, nor oppressive like the tunnels. This was the darkness of a memory, of a moment frozen in fear. Daniel opened his eyes into his old bedroom on his first night in the house. The walls were bare. The air was still, and above him, gentle at first, footsteps, soft, bare, slow. Daniel felt his chest tighten. The same dread from that night crept back, wrapping icy fingers around his spine. But he forced himself to look up. The ceiling above him was dark, the shadows swirling like thin smoke. "You chose this moment," Daniel said, voice low but steady, "because this is when I let you in." The footsteps grew louder. The shadow above him thickened. A shape pressed downward. Daniel gripped the pendant, but it was gone. Not broken, not dim, just gone. Because in this memory, he hadn't found the pendant yet. He had nothing. The ceiling bulged. A face pressed against it, stretching the material like thin skin. The voice whispered from the shadows, "Daniel." A chill swept through him, but he stood tall. "This is my memory," he said, "not yours." The shadow twisted violently. The ceiling cracked. A hand broke through, pale and skeletal, reaching for him. Daniel reached back. He grabbed the creature's wrist. The memory shuddered. The attic lights flickered. The shadow screeched, its form fracturing like broken glass. "This is where it entered," Daniel whispered. "So this is where I shut it out." The creature writhed, its shape distorting further. The ceiling tore open completely, revealing a massive black void behind the faceless shape crawling through. Daniel held on tighter. "No more fear," he said. "No more hunger. Not from me." Light burst from his hand. Not from the pendant. From him, his memory, his will, his refusal. Brilliant white light engulfed the creature's arm. It screamed, hundreds of voices crying out, as one shaking the entire attic in the memory space. The shadow recoiled, its arm dissolving into smoke. Daniel stepped forward, pushing against the void. "You can't take anything from me anymore," he growled. "Get out!" The void collapsed inward with a deafening roar. The footsteps stopped, the ceiling sealed, and Daniel was thrown backward into blinding white. He landed hard back in the real attic. The creature staggered in front of him, its stolen form flickering violently. The upside-down Daniel twisted, shrinking, collapsing in on itself as if pulled apart by invisible claws. "No," it rasped in Daniel's voice. "You are mine." Daniel rose to his feet. He felt it, something inside him burning, glowing, a remnant of the light he had summoned in the memory. He lifted his hand. The creature recoiled. "Get out of my house," Daniel whispered. A burst of white blasted from his palm. The creature screamed, its form ripping apart, fragments scattering like ash across the attic. Shadows evaporated. The walls brightened. The footsteps vanished. Silence returned. Daniel fell to his knees. Exhausted, the pendant lay beside him, unbroken, glowing softly. Then a voice drifted through the attic. Daniel. Lillian's voice, but faint, fading. He looked up, breath shaking. Lillian, a shimmer formed, weak, barely visible. Her voice trembled. It isn't finished. The last memory, the last door. Daniel forced himself to stand, gripping the pendant. What door? She pointed toward the far wall, where a door had never existed before. A door now stood, crooked, ancient, waiting. Daniel stood frozen before the crooked ancient door, his breath trembling as the cold around it seeped into his bones. The attic was silent now, stripped of footsteps and shadows, but the silence felt wrong, not peaceful, not relieved. It was the hollow quiet that comes just before a storm. The pendant in his hand pulsed faintly, its cracked symbol glowing with a thin thread of white light. A warning, a guide, a heartbeat all its own. The door did not belong in this world. Its wood was blackened with age, its surface carved with spirals and symbols that seemed to shift when Daniel was not directly looking at them. The hinges were rusted and bent, yet the door itself stood impossibly firm, embedded directly into the attic wall where no door had ever existed before. The air around it rippled, bending slightly, as though it connected to a space detached from the house and from reality. Lillian's fading form hovered beside him, flickering like a dying candle. She raised a trembling hand toward the door. The last door, she whispered, the one it used to enter you, the one it kept hidden. Daniel swallowed. This is still part of my memory. Her form flickered. Not your memory, its memory, the place it returns to when it wants to become more. Daniel shuddered. Why does it want me to open it? It does not, Lillian whispered, but it knows you must, or it will return stronger than before. The door vibrated softly, almost like breathing. Daniel took a step toward it. The pendant pulsed again, brighter this time. He lifted it toward the door. The symbols carved into the wood shimmered faintly in response, pulsing in rhythm with the pendant's cracked light. The message was clear. He had to open it. Daniel placed his hand on the door's surface. It felt ice cold, almost wet, as though water seeped from within the wood grain. He pushed gently. The door swung open. A rush of wind exploded outward, extinguishing his lantern and plunging the attic into darkness. Daniel gasped, stumbling backward, but the pendant flared to life, flooding the space with white illumination. Beyond the doorway lay a corridor, long, narrow, impossible. The ceiling arched upward in unnatural curves, the walls pulsating with faint shadows, as though something moved behind them. Daniel stepped inside, compelled by an unseen pull. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him with a reverberating thud. Daniel spun around. The door was gone. Only a solid stone wall remained. He faced the corridor ahead. The pendant's glow dimmed slightly, settling into a steady pulse, brighter when he faced forward, dimmer when he turned away. "This is where I go," Daniel said softly. Lillian's voice echoed faintly, though her form could not follow him inside. "I will guide you, if I can." Daniel moved forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The corridor seemed endless, curving sharply in impossible angles, expanding and contracting like a living lung. Daniel pressed his hand against one wall and felt warmth beneath the stone. A heartbeat, not his own. "This place is alive," he whispered. He continued walking. The shadows behind the stone rippled, as though reacting to him passing. Soft whispers drifted through the corridor, voices layered into a chaotic murmur. "Daniel, help! Stay! Run!" He quickened his pace. The whispers grew louder, some begging, others snarling. His footsteps echoed against the stone, but not always in sync. Sometimes they lagged, sometimes they raced ahead, as if other footsteps mirrored his inside the walls. The corridor opened into a large circular chamber. Daniel froze at the threshold. At the chamber's center stood a single towering monolith of black stone. Its surface was covered in shifting symbols, spirals, slashes, circles, the same sigils from the attic, from the ritual chamber beneath the earth, from the ancient mound in the forest. This stone was the source, the beginning, the place where the creature's memory was born. At the foot of the monolith lay dozens of human shapes, shadows pressed flat onto the stone floor, moving faintly like trapped echoes, struggling to break free, their silhouettes twisted, mouths opening in silent screams. Daniel forced himself forward. One shadow detached from the floor and rose into the air, coalescing into the shape of a person, a woman with flowing hair and hollow eyes. It reached toward Daniel. "Get out," it whispered. "Leave this place while it still sleeps." Daniel shook his head. "I have to end this." The shadow froze, then its form warped, shrinking into a long, stretched shape before screaming and dissolving back into the stone. Daniel approached the monolith. The pendant pulsed furiously. The crack along its symbol widened as the light grew brighter. He placed his hand against the monolith. The chamber shook. For a moment, Daniel felt nothing, no stone. No cold, no vibration, only a sudden rush of emotion. Terror, hunger, loneliness, countless echoes of suffering. The memories it had consumed flooded through him, overwhelming his senses. He staggered back, gasping. A voice echoed through the chamber, not from his memory, not from Lillian, from the creature. "You touched my beginning," it whispered. "Now touch my end." Daniel's pulse raced. "What do you want from me?" "To become." Shadows surged upward along the walls, swirling around him. The chamber darkened as the monolith cracked down its center, splitting open like a wound. A geyser of black smoke exploded outward, billowing into the chamber. The smoke twisted, forming tendrils, shaping into limbs. A head, a body, a figure made of emptiness, a shape without features. Its voice echoed through the chamber, vibrating the stone itself. "You came here, to the first moment, to the root. Now you will feed me." Daniel raised the pendant. "I destroyed your body." The creature hissed, "But not my memory." Daniel stepped backward. then I'll destroy that too." The creature laughed, a hollow, grating sound like bones grinding against each other. "You think memory can be destroyed? Memory is hunger. Memory is me." The shadows lunged. Daniel dove to the ground as a tendril sliced through the air above him. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding another strike. The pendant pulsed wildly in his hand, emitting bursts of light that caused the shadow limbs to recoil. Hissing, Daniel stood, breathing hard. "You enter through memory, so I'll seal you there." He held the pendant high. White light erupted from it, brighter than any before. The chamber walls rippled like liquid. Shadows shrieked and writhed. The creature staggered, its shape breaking apart. Daniel charged toward the monolith. The creature lunged to block him, but he slammed his shoulder into it, driving the pendant directly into the crack, splitting the stone. The chamber exploded with white light. The monolith screamed, not with a voice, but with the sound of collapsing time. The shadows vanished. The creature's form disintegrated into fragments of darkness, each piece screaming as it evaporated. Daniel was thrown backward, hitting the chamber wall hard. The monolith cracked fully, then shattered. Silence followed. Daniel struggled to stand. The chamber was dissolving around him, the corridor behind him collapsing into blinding white. He forced himself forward, reaching for the collapsing doorway. A hand grasped his arm. He turned. Lillian, her form radiant, whole, glowing with gentle light. "You found the first moment," she whispered, "and you sealed it." Daniel breathed shakily. "Is it over?" Her smile was soft, peaceful. "For you." "Yeah." The chamber collapsed. White swallowed everything. White swallowed everything, consuming the collapsing chamber, the monolith, the corridor of living stone. And the last shreds of the creature's shadow. Daniel felt weightless again, drifting through a vast emptiness without shape or sound. This time, however, he sensed something different. No echo of pain, no whispering voices crawling along the edges of his mind. The silence was whole, complete, almost peaceful, and yet he knew he was not dead. The whiteness dimmed, peeling away like mist burned by sunlight. Daniel gasped as solid ground returned beneath him. The cold air of the attic rushed around his face, the scent of old wood, dust, and the lingering traces of ashes filled his lungs. He blinked, disoriented. His knees trembled as he pushed himself upright. He was back in the attic. The ancient crooked door was gone. The warped boards had returned to normal, as if the door had never existed at all. Only faint scorch marks remained on the floor where the pendant's burst of light had struck. The pendant lay beside him, whole. Its crack had vanished entirely, the symbol restored, shining softly with a calm, steady glow. The touch of it was warm against his palm, the warmth of something living, something relieved. Daniel exhaled shakily. "It's over." But the attic did not answer. The silence pressed around him, heavy and uncertain. Then a soft whisper drifted through the space. "Daniel." He looked up sharply. Lillian stood near the far wall, glowing faintly, but her form was different now, clearer, brighter, her edges no longer frayed with distortion. She looked almost alive, almost human, almost real. Daniel stood slowly, his chest tightening. "You made it out." I lingered. She whispered, "Longer than most, long enough to help you see what it wanted you to forget." Daniel stepped closer. "You saved me more times than I can count." Her smile was soft. "Saddle, I only showed you the path. You walked it." The attic creaked gently, not in menace, but in relief, as if the house itself finally exhaled after decades of holding in fear. The shadows softened, no longer twitching along the walls. The air was warm, almost welcoming. Daniel felt his shoulders ease for the first time since he arrived at the house. "Is it really gone?" he asked. "The creature's memory is sealed," Lillian said. "Its hunger is trapped in the moment you reclaimed. And the house, it will heal," she whispered slowly. "Wounds this deep never close overnight." Daniel took another step toward her. "What about you?" Her glow flickered gently. "My connection to this place was born of pain. When you sealed the root, the pain dissolved." Daniel's throat tightened. "So you're free." She looked at him with grateful eyes. For the first time, Daniel felt a weight lift from his chest. A warmth spread through him, a quiet sense of victory, not triumphant, not loud, but deep and true. But Lillian's expression dimmed. "There is still something you must see," she whispered. "Before I go." Daniel's brow furrowed. "What is it?" Lillian lifted her hand. Her glow brightened, and then the attic dissolved around them. Daniel gasped as another scene materialized before him. Soft, hazy, like a dream filtered through old glass. A room, not the attic, not the cavern, a nursery. The wallpaper was faded blue with small white stars. The crib sat in the corner. A rocking chair rested near the window, moonlight spilling across its wooden frame. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What is this place?" The first time it touched a human world, Lillian whispered, long before the house was built, long before the seals were carved. Daniel stepped forward. Every instinct warned him not to look into the crib, but he forced himself closer. His hand trembled as he pushed aside the faded blanket. Inside the crib lay only dust. Lillian spoke softly. "A child disappeared here. No trace, no sound, only footsteps on the ceiling." Daniel felt his pulse stumble. The creature began with a child. It began with a memory, Lillian said. A moment of fear so pure. It opened a door, and the creature learned that the youngest minds are often the ones who listen first. Daniel stared at the empty crib, heart aching. "Why show me this? So you understand what you stopped," Lillian whispered. "You didn't just seal a hungry shadow. You closed a door that had been open for centuries." The crib dissolved into white mist. The nursery faded. The attic returned. Lillian stood before him, her glow fading gently. "I am almost gone," she whispered, "but I need to ask you something before I leave." Daniel swallowed hard. "Ask anything." "Will you leave this place?" she asked. "Or will you stay to protect it, to ensure nothing ever wakes again?" Daniel looked around the attic. The house was no longer cold, no longer haunted. It felt empty in a peaceful way, like a place finally released from torment. But he also felt something else, a trace of warmth in the walls, a pulse of quiet life. The house was not dangerous now, but it still needed someone. Guard the fragile quiet it had regained. Daniel closed his eyes. Images flashed through his mind. The mound in the forest splitting open. The tar creature rising, screaming with stolen voices. The monolith cracking under the pendant's power. The upside-down doppelganger smiling from the ceiling. Lillian's fragile light guiding him through every door. He opened his eyes and met her fading gaze. "I'll stay," Daniel whispered. "Not because I have to, because it deserves a keeper, a witness, and a guardian." Lillian's smile brightened, warm and proud. "Then the house is safe." Her glow dimmed further. "Goodbye, Daniel." He reached out, but his hand passed through her as she dissolved into soft silver fragments, each one drifting upward like dust caught in sunlight. One by one, the fragments vanished into the air. The attic fell silent. Daniel lowered his hand slowly. He stood alone now, but he was not afraid. He walked to the small attic window. Morning light was beginning to break, painting the horizon in pale gold. The forest was still, the world at peace. For the first time, Daniel felt the quiet inside himself match the quiet around him. He looked at the pendant in his hand. It glowed softly, not with power, but with memory, with gratitude. Daniel turned from the window, descended the attic stairs, and stepped into the quiet house he had chosen to protect. The nightmare had ended, but his watch had just begun. The morning light crept slowly across the floorboards as Daniel descended the attic stairs, each soft step echoing through a house that finally felt alive again. Not haunted, not wounded, alive. The silence wrapped around him like a warm blanket, no longer laced with tension or lurking dread. Dust floated lazily through the soft beams of sunlight filling the hallway. For the first time since stepping foot in the house, Daniel did not feel watched. He stepped into the living room. The ash-filled fireplace was cold now, inert, the sigils around its edge faint and harmless. The old photographs on the walls once twisted, their faces hollowed and screaming had returned to normal. Families smiled warmly from sepia frames. Children laughed. Not a single face bore the scars of the creature's influence. Daniel ran a hand over one of the wooden frames. "You're free," he whispered. The house seemed to settle in response. A gentle creak, a soft sigh, almost like gratitude. His body ached from the battle beneath the earth and the strain of sealing the creature's memory, but his mind felt clearer than it had in years. He moved through the house room by room, testing floors, checking shadows, tracing his fingers along walls that once pulsed with malevolence. All felt normal, mundane, human. He stopped at the base of the staircase. A faint warmth pulsed in the pendant resting against his chest. When he lifted it, he saw the glow had changed. No longer bright white, no longer fractured or trembling. It was gentler now, softer, a slow, rhythmic pulse, like a steady heartbeat. "Still with me," Daniel murmured. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to the pendant, to Lillian, or to the house itself. He made his way toward the front door. The morning air hummed through the small cracks in the wood. When he stepped outside, the sunlight washed across his face, Drawing a deep exhale from his chest, the forest stood silent, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. No trembling earth, no shadows moving unnaturally between the trees, no whispers. He walked across the clearing. The grass dampened his shoes with dew. The mound in the far distance, the place where the first seal had broken, was gone. The earth had smoothed over, as if time itself had healed the wound. Only a faint circular depression marked where the nightmare had clawed its way out. Daniel knelt and placed a hand on the soil. Warm, alive. He nodded once, satisfied, and stood. But before he could turn back toward the house, something flickered at the edge of his vision. A shimmer, a soft silver glow drifting upward from the tree line. Daniel froze, heart-jolting recognition blooming instantly. Lillian, her form coalesced slowly, not solid but beautifully clear, more whole than ever before. Her hair flowed gently in the morning breeze, her faint glow matching the soft pulse of the pendant. "Daniel," she whispered. He stepped closer. "I thought you were gone." "I am," she said softly. "At least, I am leaving, but I needed to see you one last time." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. "To say goodbye." She nodded. "You saved them, all of them." The echoes trapped in the creature's hunger, the memories it stole, the shadows it twisted. Her eyes softened. "And you saved me." Daniel swallowed. The words came hard. "I only did what I had to." "No," she whispered. "You did what no one else could. You walked through every door, faced every memory, and when the root demanded an answer, you chose courage." The breeze rustled through the leaves. Daniel looked down, unable to hold her gaze. "I just wish I could have done more." "You did everything," she said. He forced himself to meet her eyes. "What happens to you now?" She glanced upward, toward the sky now brightening with gold and soft pastels. "I go where the echoes go when they're no longer chained to pain." He nodded slowly. "A better place. A true place," she whispered. Silence stretched between them, warm, peaceful, bittersweet. Daniel reached toward her, but stopped short, remembering that his hand would pass through her. She smiled gently and moved closer. "Thank you," she whispered. The pendant pulsed gently, matching the glow of her fading form. Daniel breathed deeply. "Will I ever see you again?" Her smile softened. "Not in the ways you expect, but I'll be here." She lifted a hand toward the house, in its quiet, then toward the forest, in its peace, and finally toward his chest. "And in your strength." The glow around her brightened. Daniel's voice cracked. "Goodbye, Lillian. Goodbye." Daniel, her entire form dissolved into silver dust, rising, swirling, drifting upward like shimmering embers carried by the wind. Daniel watched the particles fade into the brightening morning sky until not a single glimmer remained. He stood alone in the clearing once more, but he did not feel alone. He turned and walked back toward the house. The structure looked different now, not haunted, not looming, not broken. Just a house, a place that had endured decades of darkness and finally reclaimed the quiet it had lost. When Daniel stepped through the doorway, the house welcomed him with soft light pooling across the floor. He closed the door gently behind him and leaned against it, letting the silence settle into him. This was his home now, not a battleground, not a prison, a sanctuary, a place he had earned through sweat, fear, courage, and the resolve to face the unimaginable. He walked through the rooms, slowly straightening a picture, adjusting a curtain, brushing dust from a table. Every action felt symbolic, like stitching the final seams of a wound. When he reached the kitchen, he filled a glass of water and stood at the counter, letting the cool liquid soothe his throat. Then he heard it, a soft creak, not sharp, not heavy, not unnatural, just the house adjusting to the warmth of a new day. Daniel smiled. He placed the pendant on the center of the kitchen table. The glow dimmed into a gentle throb before finally fading, leaving behind a warm spark of memory inside the metal. "Rest," Daniel whispered. "You've done enough." He walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped onto the porch. The morning sun had risen fully now, painting the world with color and life. A bird perched on the railing, chirping softly. Daniel breathed deeply, smelling pine, earth, dew, and the sweetness of peace. The world felt right again. He looked back at the house. "I'll keep watch," he said. "I promise." He stepped down from the porch and began his slow walk toward the forest path, not to fight or flee, but simply to see the world he had saved. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, where ancient wounds had finally been sealed, the last faint echo of the creature faded into silence forever. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.